There is a quiet contradiction in the body you are living in right now. The more stable your life becomes, the harder it seems to remain physically strong. You sit on softer surfaces, walk on flatter ground, eat more regularly, and rest more safely than most humans who came before you. And yet, strength fades more easily, effort feels heavier, and recovery takes longer. Nothing appears to be missing, but something subtle no longer fits. Long ago, the human body was shaped inside environments that did not allow comfort to last. Movement was not a choice, and strength was not something to maintain, but something constantly required just to continue. Today, that requirement has quietly disappeared, but the body that once depended on it has not fully changed. So what happens when a body built for constant demand is placed into a world that no longer asks for it? And why can't you stay strong like humans used to? There is a moment that feels almost too small to notice, when your body begins to give up strength not in a dramatic way, but quietly, in the middle of something ordinary. You stand up after sitting for a while, and there is a brief hesitation in your legs. You carry something that once felt light, and now it asks for more effort than you expected. You walk a familiar distance, and your body seems to slow before your mind does. Nothing has clearly gone wrong, and yet something no longer holds as easily as it used to. This kind of change does not arrive like an injury. It arrives without a clear beginning, without a single cause, and without a clear moment where it can be reversed. It simply appears, as if the body is following a pattern that you were never fully aware of. When this happens, it is easy to assume that strength is something that fades naturally over time, something that declines, because it must. But this assumption carries a quiet simplification. It treats the body as if it exists on its own, separate from the conditions that shape it. In reality, the body does not weaken in isolation. It responds continuously and precisely to the demands placed upon it. If those demands change, even slowly, the body changes with them. This is not a failure of the body, but a reflection of the environment it is living in. Long before there were stable surfaces, predictable routines, or controlled spaces, the human body developed inside conditions that rarely allowed stillness to last. Movement was not an activity chosen at certain times of day. It was woven into the structure of survival itself. To move was not to exercise, but to continue. To stop for too long was not a form of rest, but a risk. In that kind of environment, strength was not something to build or maintain through effort. It was something that remained present because it was constantly being used. There was no clear line between activity and rest, because both existed within the same continuous flow of living. The ground was uneven, distances were uncertain, and the body was always adjusting, always stabilizing, always carrying some form of load, even when it did not feel like work in the modern sense. Over time, this constant demand shaped not only muscles, but the deeper systems that support them, including balance, coordination, and the ability to recover from repeated strain. These systems did not operate in isolation. They formed together, under pressure, across long periods of time, and across many generations that experienced similar conditions. In contrast, the present environment removes many of these demands in ways that are almost invisible. Surfaces are flat, distances are shortened, and effort is often delayed or replaced. The body is no longer required to adapt continuously, and so it begins to adapt to something else, a pattern of reduced necessity. This shift does not happen all at once. It unfolds gradually, and because it is gradual, it is rarely questioned. The body simply follows the signals it receives. When those signals become less frequent, less varied, and less demanding, the body responds by reducing the systems that are no longer required to operate at the same level. Strength, in this sense, is not lost as a sudden event. It is quietly adjusted downward, in alignment with a world that no longer insists on its constant presence. And so the moment when your body feels slightly less capable is not just a personal experience. It is a reflection of a much longer transition, one that began when the conditions shaping human life started to change in ways that reduced the need for continuous physical demand. The question is not simply why strength fades, but what kind of world the body was expecting when it first learned how to be strong. and how far that world now is from the one you are living in today. The feeling does not come all at once, and that is what makes it difficult to understand. It is not a clear loss, but a quiet adjustment, as if the body is slowly lowering its expectations of itself. You notice it in small repetitions. The second time you lift something feels slightly heavier than the first. A short walk feels longer than it should. Holding a position becomes uncomfortable sooner, even though nothing has visibly changed. These are not signs of failure in the usual sense. They are signals, but the signals are subtle, and they do not point to a single cause. Instead, they suggest that the body is responding to something that is no longer present in the same way it once was. It is easy to assume that strength depends on moments of effort, on occasional bursts of activity that push the body to its limits. But for most of human existence, strength was not shaped by intensity. It was shaped by continuity. The body did not become strong because it was challenged briefly. It remained strong because it was never allowed to fully disengage. There was no long separation between effort and rest. Even in quieter moments, the body was still involved in maintaining posture, adjusting to uneven ground, or preparing for the next movement. This constant low-level engagement created a different kind of stability, one that did not rely on peaks of effort, but on the absence of true inactivity. When this continuity disappears, the change is not immediately obvious. The body still moves, still functions, still completes the tasks it needs to complete. But something underneath begins to shift. The signals that once told the body to maintain strength become less frequent. The need to stabilize, to carry, to adapt, to endure over long periods without interruption begins to fade. In response, the body does what it has always done. It adjusts. It does not hold on to strength for its own sake. It preserves what is necessary and reduces what is not being used. This process is not visible in a single moment. It becomes noticeable only when compared across time, when something that used to feel natural begins to require attention. In earlier human environments, this kind of reduction would have been difficult to sustain. A decrease in strength would have been immediately tested by the demands of daily life. If the body could not carry, it would need to adapt quickly. If it could not move efficiently, it would be forced to adjust. The environment itself acted as a constant feedback system, preventing long-term decline from going unnoticed. In the present, that feedback has been softened. The world allows for compensation. Tasks can be delayed, avoided, or replaced. Movement can be reduced without immediate consequence. Because of this, the body can shift gradually without being pushed back into alignment. The loss of strength does not trigger a direct response, because the environment no longer requires it to. This creates a space where change can continue quietly, without interruption. Over longer periods, this quiet adjustment becomes the new normal. What once felt like a small difference becomes a stable condition. The body no longer expects to operate at the same level, and so it reorganizes itself around a lower demand. This does not mean that the body is incapable of strength. It means that it is no longer being asked to maintain it in the same continuous way. When looking back across human history, this pattern becomes more visible. Early human bodies existed in environments where variation was constant and unavoidable. Surfaces changed, distances shifted, loads were unpredictable, and the body had to remain ready across all of it. Strength was not an isolated trait. It was part of a broader system of readiness, shaped by continuous interaction with the environment. In contrast, the modern environment reduces variation. It creates predictability, and with predictability comes a narrowing of the demands placed on the body. Over time, this narrowing changes what the body prepares for, and what it no longer needs to maintain. The result is not a sudden loss, but a gradual redefinition of what strength means within a new context. The body follows this shift quietly, without resistance, because it is not designed to hold on to past conditions. It is designed to match the present. And if the present no longer asks for the same kind of strength, the body slowly lets it go, not as a failure, but as a form of adaptation that is still unfolding. Strength also changes, because the body remembers demand through repetition, not through memory in the way the mind remembers a place or a face, but through the quiet adjustment of tissue, balance, coordination, and effort. A person may think of strength as something stored inside the muscles, as if the body keeps a fixed reserve that can be opened whenever it is needed. But the human body is more responsive than that. It keeps what it is repeatedly asked to keep. It reduces what is no longer called upon. This is why the first loss can feel unfair. The body does not ask whether a person still wants to be strong. It listens to the pattern of days. If the pattern says that heavy carrying is rare, long walking is rare, squatting is rare, climbing is rare, and steady strain across changing ground is rare, then the body gradually stops preparing for those things as if they belong to ordinary life. This does not mean that the body has become broken. It means that the body is still using an ancient rule: adapt to the world that surrounds you. The problem is that the surrounding world has changed faster than the deep habits of the body can fully explain. For early humans, the body was not trained by separate sessions of effort. It was shaped by the repeated pressure of living. A meal, a shelter, a fire, a safe resting place, a crossing of land, a carried child, a gathered object, or a difficult path could all require movement. These demands were not identical everywhere, and no honest account should pretend that all human groups lived the same way. Climate, terrain, available food, tools, age, injury, and social life all mattered. Yet the broad pattern is widely accepted. Human bodies evolved in settings where physical engagement with the environment was far more continuous than it is for many people today. The beginning of human strength was not a gym-like event. It was the slow shaping of a body that had to coordinate itself with weather, ground, distance, hunger, fatigue, and other bodies nearby. That older pattern left no sharp border between being active and simply being alive. In the present, the border is much clearer. There are moments when the body is used, and long stretches when it is protected from being used. A chair holds the body. A smooth floor removes small adjustments. A vehicle shortens distance. A machine carries weight. A screen gathers attention while the body remains nearly still. None of these things are bad in themselves. They are part of the safety and stability that human beings work toward across history, but they also change the signals reaching the body. The legs receive fewer reasons to stay ready. The back receives fewer ordinary loads. The hands receive fewer rough surfaces and fewer varied tasks. The feet receive less changing ground. The whole body receives less of the low, steady conversation with the physical world that once helped keep strength present without needing to name it. This is why the first subtle loss of strength can feel strange. It is not only about age. It is about the disappearance of ordinary demands that once reminded the body what to preserve. A modern person may still work hard, feel tired, and carry mental pressure through the day. But tiredness is not always the same as physical demand. A body can be exhausted and underused at the same time. This is one of the quiet mismatches of modern life. The nervous system may feel burdened, while the muscles, tendons, bones, and balance systems receive too little of the varied use that shaped them over long human time. The result is a form of weakness that does not always announce itself while as weakness. It appears as stiffness, hesitation, reduced confidence in movement, or the sense that the body has become less available. Seen from the long view of human origins, this is not a simple story of decline. It is a story of context. The body is not failing to remember strength. It is being given fewer reasons to keep remembering it. And so the first quiet loss is not the end of the question, but the doorway into it. If strength once came from a world that constantly required the body, what happens when that world becomes quieter than the body was built to expect? The human body was not shaped for strength as a separate achievement, the way modern life often imagines it. It was shaped for use. This difference matters because a body built for use does not wait for special moments to become active. It does not divide life into exercise and everything else. It expects movement to be part of the background of living, as ordinary as breathing, seeing, carrying, reaching, bending, and standing. In the modern world, strength often appears as something a person must add back into life after long hours of stillness. It becomes a planned activity, placed between other obligations, measured, repeated, and sometimes abandoned when the day becomes too full. But the deeper history of the human body points toward another arrangement. For most of the time in which our species and earlier human relatives took shape, Movement was not an optional layer added to survival. It was the condition under which survival unfolded. This does not mean every ancient person was powerful in the same way, or that life before agriculture was one simple picture of constant strength. Human groups lived in different climates, used different tools, followed different foods, and faced different limits. Still, across these variations, the body was commonly involved with the world in a direct physical way that many modern environments no longer require. The hands were not just tools of fine control. They were also instruments of gripping, pulling, scraping, carrying, shaping, and holding. The feet were not simply platforms for short walks across flat surfaces. They were parts of a moving system that read the ground, adjusted to stones, slopes, mud, roots, sand, and distance. The back and hips were not only places where fatigue gathered, they were parts of a structure that helped carry loads, balance weight, and keep the body moving through uncertain terrain. Strength, in this older sense, was not isolated inside large muscles. It belonged to the whole body, because the whole body was repeatedly asked to respond. This is why the idea of being strong like humans used to be can be misleading if it is imagined only as size, force, or heroic endurance. Human strength was probably more practical than dramatic. It was the ability to keep going, to coordinate effort, to recover enough, to carry what had to be carried, and to remain physically capable inside a changing environment. That kind of strength grows from continuous use, not from a single kind of training. It is built by many small demands layered together over time. A slope asks the ankles to adjust, a load asks the shoulders and trunk to organize, a long distance asks the legs to work without wasting too much energy. A rough surface asks balance to remain awake. Repetition gives the body information, and the body changes according to that information. Bones respond to loading. Muscles respond to repeated effort. Tendons and connective tissues respond to use and recovery. The nervous system learns coordination from the problems it repeatedly solves. These are not mysterious ideas. They are basic biological principles. Living tissue is not fixed material. It is responsive, and it changes according to the pattern of demand placed upon it. The ancient human environment gave the body many such patterns, not because it was designed to improve health, but because life itself created them. Modern comfort reduces many of these patterns at once. It smooths the floor, lifts the load, shortens the journey, supports the posture, and narrows the range of movement. The body then receives a smaller set of instructions. It is still alive, still capable, still adaptable, but it is adapting to reduced physical conversation with the world. This is the beginning of the deeper answer. You cannot stay strong like humans used to, because the body does not maintain ancient readiness in a modern silence. It waits for signals, and when the old signals fade, strength becomes something that must be deliberately preserved rather than continuously demanded by life itself. A body built for constant use does not only become strong in the obvious places, it becomes strong through small agreements between many systems that are rarely noticed until they begin to weaken. The feet learn how to meet the ground, the ankles learn how to correct a slight shift before it becomes a fall, the hips learn how to carry weight from one step into the next. The spine learns how to hold the body upright while the hands are doing something else. The breath learns how to support long movement without turning every effort into alarm. None of these abilities belongs to strength in the narrow modern sense, yet together they form the kind of strength that allowed humans to remain capable inside landscapes that were never perfectly arranged for them. This is why the old human body should not be imagined only as a body with larger muscles. The deeper difference was not just force. It was integration. Many parts of the body were repeatedly asked to work together, and because they were asked often, they stayed connected in function. A person moving through uneven land did not only use the legs. The eyes searched the ground, the inner ear helped with balance, the trunk stabilized the body, the hands adjusted to what was carried, and the feet changed pressure from one surface to another. Even simple movement was not simple when the world beneath the body was changing. This matters because the human body did not begin in a world of clean separations. It did not begin with a chair for resting, a flat path for walking, a table for working, and a separate time for exercise. It began in environments where posture, movement, carrying, searching, and resting were closer together. The same body that sat near a fire might soon rise, lift, walk, bend, or turn. The same hands that held food might also shape a tool or steady the body against the ground. The same feet that rested might later cross rough terrain. Because the demands were mixed together, the body's strength was also mixed together. It was not confined to one movement or one muscle group. It was spread through habits of readiness. Modern life often removes this mixture. It gives support before support is needed. It separates work from movement, movement from travel, travel from effort, and effort from ordinary survival. This separation is comfortable, and it is one reason modern life can be safer and less exhausting than many earlier forms of life. But it also changes the way the body receives demand. A supported body has less reason to organize itself. A body that rarely carries uneven loads has less reason to keep the trunk and grip quietly prepared. A body that moves mostly over smooth surfaces has less reason to keep balance awake in the same way. Over time, the body does not simply lose strength. It loses the habit of using strength across many small situations. This can make weakness feel confusing. A person may still be able to perform one clear effort, yet feel unstable, stiff, or uncertain during ordinary movement. The problem is not always the absence of force. Sometimes it is the absence of repeated coordination. In the long view of human origins, this distinction is important. Early human strength was likely shaped not by isolated displays, but by ordinary coordination repeated across days. Archaeology can show tools, bones, footprints, settlements, and traces of labor, but it cannot give a perfect recording of every movement that filled ancient lives. Still, the broad picture is clear enough to be careful with. Human bodies developed under conditions where physical interaction with the environment was frequent, varied, and necessary. That kind of interaction trained the body without naming it training. It linked strength to balance, endurance, skill, and recovery. Today, those links can loosen because daily life no longer requires them in the same continuous form. The body remains adaptable, but adaptation always listens to the present more than to the past. If the present asks mostly for sitting, supported posture, brief walking, and occasional effort, the body slowly becomes fluent in those conditions. It does not keep the full language of older movement unless that language is still being spoken. And so, to understand why you cannot stay strong like humans used to, we have to look beyond muscle alone. We have to look at the quiet web of use that once held the whole body together, and at the modern world that has gently pulled many of those threads apart. The body built for constant use also learned something quieter than effort. It learned economy. Strength in the human story was never only about producing force. It was also about spending force carefully, because energy was not unlimited and movement could not be separated from the need to keep living afterward. A body that had to walk, carry, bend, gather, climb, lift, and recover could not afford to waste itself in every movement. It had to become useful, not just powerful. This is one reason the modern idea of strength can become too narrow. It often looks for the visible result, the weight lifted, the muscle seen, the short moment of exertion. But older human strength likely depended on a slower kind of efficiency, shaped by repeated contact with the world. The foot did not symmetrize the ground. It learned where to place pressure. The hand did not simply grip. It learned how tightly to hold, when to release, how to save effort. The back did not simply carry. It learned how to share a burden through the hips, legs, shoulders, and breath. These are small things, but small things repeated across thousands of ordinary days become a biological pattern. In early human life, the body was surrounded by tasks that rewarded this pattern. A person who moved wastefully would tire sooner. A body that could not adjust would struggle with distance, uneven land, carried objects, and repeated work. This does not mean every earlier human was constantly strong, healthy, or free from pain. That would be a false picture. Ancient bodies also experienced injury, hunger, disease, childbirth risks, physical wear, and limits we should not romanticize. But within those limits, the body was regularly taught to remain useful. It received practice from the structure of life itself. The ground gave feedback. The weather gave feedback. Scarcity gave feedback. Tools gave feedback. Other people gave feedback. Because survival was rarely a completely individual matter. Strength belonged not only to one body, but to the way bodies moved through shared demands. This is where the modern loss becomes more subtle. Many people today still feel tired, but the tiredness often comes from a different source. Long attention, stress, screens, schedules, and mental pressure can exhaust a person while leaving much of the body physically under-requested. The mind may feel full, while the muscles have not been asked to coordinate very much. The nervous system may feel strained, while the bones have received little loading. The day may feel heavy, while the body has crossed only smooth floors, short corridors, vehicles, stairs, and chairs. This creates a strange split. A person can feel worn out without having used the body in the old integrated way. The result is not restful weakness, but disconnected weakness. The body is not necessarily recovering from useful effort. It is often waiting for signals that never arrive. From the viewpoint of human origins, this matters because the body's older strength was not maintained by comfort. It was maintained by continual negotiation with discomfort, distance, texture, weight, and uncertainty. Modern environments have removed many of those negotiations, and that removal is one of civilization's great achievements. It has reduced danger, saved labor, and made life more predictable. But the body does not interpret every reduction of hardship as a reason to stay strong. It interprets reduced demand as information. If the world no longer asks the feet to adjust, the balance systems to wake, the hips to carry, the shoulders to stabilize, and the hands to grip, the body gradually stops keeping those capacities at the same level. This is not a moral failure. It is biology doing what biology has always done. The same adaptability that once helped humans survive changing landscapes now helps the body settle into modern stillness. So the question of strength is not only why muscles fade, or why effort becomes harder. It is why a body shaped for economical, continuous, whole-body use now lives in a world that gives it comfort without giving it the same reasons to remain capable. The old human body did not stay strong because it was superior. It stayed strong because its surroundings kept asking, quietly and repeatedly, for strength to remain present. For most of human history, movement was not something placed inside a day after the important work was done. Movement was the way the day existed. To reach food, water, shelter, tools, firewood, other people, or a safer place to rest, the body had to cross distance. Sometimes the distance may have been short, sometimes long, and it would have varied greatly between landscapes and groups. But the larger pattern remains clear enough. Human life began in a world where staying alive required the body to move through space, again and again. This is very different from the modern feeling of movement as a choice. Today, a person may decide to walk, decide to lift, decide to stretch, decide to exercise, or decide to avoid all of it for many hours, because the environment allows that avoidance. In older conditions, avoidance had a much narrower spatial strain. The body did not receive a polite invitation to be active. It was pulled into activity by hunger, weather, terrain, care for children. This does not mean ancient life was a constant struggle without rest. Human beings rested, gathered near one another, made shelters, used tools, shared effort, and found ways to reduce unnecessary labor whenever they could. But even those reductions happened inside a world where movement remained difficult to remove. The beginning of human strength was tied to this unavoidable movement. A body that had to rise from the ground, walk across uneven surfaces, carry small and large loads, bend toward plants, lift objects, follow paths, return with something useful, and do it again across seasons was receiving a steady education in physical readiness. It was not being trained for appearance. It was being kept in contact with necessity. That contact changed the meaning of strength. Strength was not only the ability to do one hard thing, it was the ability to remain available for many ordinary things that could not always be predicted. A smooth modern day can hide this difference. If a person lives among chairs, vehicles, elevators, flat floors, and delivered goods, the body can pass through long hours without being truly required. It may still feel busy, it may still feel tired, but the tiredness is often organized around attention, deadlines, and mental strain, while the body itself receives only brief fragments of demand. In the older human setting, tiredness and use were more closely joined. The body grew tired because it had been part of the work of living. The legs did not wait for a special hour to be used. The hands did not wait for a chosen task to grip. The back did not wait for a planned load to stabilize. Movement entered the day because the world did not hand survival to the body at close range. This is one reason staying strong now can feel so strangely difficult. Modern life has made many good things easier, but it has also broken the continuity that once carried strength forward without naming it. A person can now spend a day completing many responsibilities while giving the body only narrow, repetitive signals. Sitting, standing briefly, walking a few steps, leaning over a screen, driving, resting in supported positions. These actions do not ask the whole body to remain ready in the old way. They ask it to conserve, to narrow, to specialize in stillness and brief transitions. Over time, the body listens. It does not accuse the modern world of being too comfortable. It simply reads comfort as reduced need. In deep human time, the body was shaped where movement was not optional, because distance, ground, and material life kept asking it to participate. That participation gave strength a daily reason to stay present. Without that reason, strength no longer lives quietly in the background of ordinary life. It becomes something separate, something that must be invited back. While the body continues adapting to a world that has made movement easier to postpone, movement became unavoidable, not only because ancient people had to travel, but because the useful things of life were rarely arranged in one place. Food might be found in one direction, water in another, shelter materials somewhere else, and safer resting spaces only after the body had already crossed ground that did not make movement easy. This is an important difference between the older human world and the modern one. Today, many necessities have been gathered around the body. A person can remain in a small space and still receive food, warmth, light, information, and contact with others. The body can stay nearly still while the world comes toward it. But the human body did not first learn strength in such a world. It learned strength in places where the body had to go outward, where need was spread across land, weather, seasons, and distance. No careful account should pretend that all early humans lived the same way, because human groups adapted to forests, coasts, grasslands, cold regions, dry regions, rivers, mountains, and many mixed environments. Yet across those differences, the body was often the bridge between need and survival. The legs carried the person toward what was missing. The hands returned with what could be used. The back, hips, shoulders, and breath helped turn movement into continuation. This kind of life created strength through repeated necessity, not through dramatic hardship. The demand was not always extreme, but it was persistent. Even a small daily distance, repeated again and again across changing ground, can shape the body differently from a life where movement is short, flat, and optional. Even a modest load carried often can teach the body to organize itself around effort. Even simple bending, reaching, squatting, rising, and balancing can become powerful when they are woven into the whole fabric of a day. From the beginning of human life, the body was not merely present in the environment, it had to negotiate with it. The ground did not stay level, the weather did not stay gentle, the available resources did not stay fixed. Because of this, strength was not a single ability but a continuing relationship between the body and the world around it. Modern life weakens that relationship by making many negotiations unnecessary. The floor stays flat, the chair receives the weight, the container holds the water, the vehicle carries the distance. The machine lifts, pulls, cuts, heats, cools, and transports. These changes are not mistakes. They are part of the long human effort to reduce suffering and danger. But every time the world carries something for the body receives one less reason to keep that capacity awake. Over time, the absence of reasons becomes a kind of instruction. The body does not preserve unused readiness out of loyalty to its past. It follows the present pattern. If the present says that food does not require walking far, warmth does not require gathering material, social life does not require bodily presence, and work does not require full body involvement, then the body adapts to that softer arrangement. This is why the loss of strength can feel hidden inside convenience. Nothing dramatic happens when a task disappears. There is no clear warning when a walk becomes shorter, when a load becomes lighter, when a posture becomes more supported, or when a movement is replaced by a device. But the body records these absences in its own slow way. It becomes less practiced at solving the physical problems that once appeared many times each day. In older human environments, movement was not optional because the world placed life's needs outside the resting body. The body had to cross the space between lack and use. That crossing, repeated through childhood, adulthood, and shared labor, helped keep strength from becoming separate from life. In the modern world, the space between need and use has often collapsed. What is needed comes closer, faster, and with less bodily cost. The gain is comfort, safety, and time. The quiet loss is that strength no longer receives the same daily call from the world. It waits inside the body as a possibility, but possibility alone is not enough to keep it fully present. Without repeated necessity, strength slowly changes from a living background into something that must be remembered on purpose. Movement was also unavoidable, because the human body lived within time, differently than many bodies do now. A modern day can be divided into blocks, with work in one place, rest in another, exercise somewhere separate, and sleep protected by walls, schedules, and stored resources. Older human life was not divided so cleanly. The body had to remain responsive across the day because need could return before the body felt ready. A person might rest, but rest did not erase distance. A person might eat, but eating did not remove the next search for food. A person might find shelter, but shelter still required upkeep, materials, fire, protection, or movement toward a safer place when conditions changed. This does not mean early humans were always in danger or always active. That picture would be too simple. Human beings have always tried to reduce effort where they could. They used tools, shared labor, followed knowledge, chose routes, returned to familiar places, and rested when rest was possible. But the deeper pattern remained. Movement was not a separate choice placed after life. It was folded into the rhythm of life itself. This rhythm shaped strength in a way that is difficult to recreate when movement appears only in short, planned fragments. In the older setting, the body did not wait for one clear task before it organized itself. It stayed prepared because the next need might require standing, turning, lifting, carrying, climbing, walking, or balancing before there was time for special preparation. Strength, then, was connected to readiness. It was not only the power to perform, it was the quiet ability to answer the next physical demand without a long transition. This is one of the major differences between a body living inside necessity and a body living inside convenience. Convenience allows the body to become physically unready for long stretches without immediate consequence. A chair allows the hips and spine to surrender part of their work. A vehicle allows the legs to avoid distance. Stored food allows hunger to be answered without a search across land. Artificial light extends attention while the body remains still. These changes make life safer and more controllable, but they also change the timing of demand. The body receives long periods with very little whole body requirement, followed by brief moments where strength is suddenly expected. It is asked to lift after sitting, walk after stillness, stabilize after support, and recover from effort that no longer grows naturally out of the day. This suddenness can make ordinary movement feel harder than it should. The body is not being called from motion into more motion. It is being called from stillness into demand. In deep human time, this would have been less common as a daily pattern. Movement tended to lead into movement. A person who had been walking could bend, lift, gather, carry, or continue walking with systems already awake. Balance, breath, muscles, joints, and attention were already participating. The body was not repeatedly switched off and then asked to return instantly. Modern life often creates exactly that switch. It lowers physical participation for hours, then asks the body to respond as if nothing has been lost during the pause. Over years, this pattern changes what feels natural. Strength becomes less like a background condition and more like a temporary state that must be summoned. The link to human origins is important here because it keeps the question honest. The issue is not that earlier humans were magical, untouched by weakness, or permanently strong. They were vulnerable, and their bodies wore down under many pressures. But their physical world asked for participation more often, and that participation kept many systems in conversation with each other. Today, the conversation is quieter. The body still carries the old capacity to adapt, but it adapts to the quieter rhythm it is given. This is why you may feel that strength slips away even when life is not easy. Difficulty alone does not maintain strength. The body needs physical demand that is frequent, varied, and connected to ordinary living. When that demand becomes rare, strength is no longer carried forward by the day itself. It becomes a possibility waiting beneath comfort, still real, but less often awakened by the world around it. Uneven ground may seem like a small detail, but for the human body it changes everything. A flat surface lets movement become narrow and predictable. The foot lands almost the same way again and again. The ankles do less correction, the hips receive fewer surprises. The spine can follow a familiar rhythm, and balance can sleep more deeply than it was once allowed to. But the older human world was not made of flat paths waiting for the body. It was made of slopes, roots, stones, mud, sand, grass, ice, dust, river edges, fallen branches, and broken surfaces that shifted under weight. A body crossing such ground had to stay awake in many places at once. The eyes had to read the next step. The feet had to feel pressure and texture. The ankles had to adjust before the mind had time to name the adjustment. The hips and trunk had to keep the body from collapsing into every small error. This kind of strength does not look dramatic from the outside. It is quiet, repeated, and deeply practical. Yet it may be one of the reasons older patterns of life kept the body more fully engaged than many modern environments do now. When the ground is unstable, the body cannot move as a simple machine. It must negotiate. Each step becomes a small conversation between weight and surface. If the ground tilts, the body tilts back. If a stone rolls, the body spreads the correction through the foot, knee, hip, back, shoulders, and arms. If a path narrows, the body shortens the step. If a load is being carried, the adjustment becomes even more complex, because balance is no longer only about the body's own weight. In early human life, this kind of negotiation would not have been a special challenge chosen for training. It would have been part of ordinary movement through real landscapes. Different groups lived in different places, and no single terrain can stand for all human history. But the beginning of human movement was clearly not built around smooth flooring and stable furniture. It was built in contact with land that required attention from the whole body. This matters because strength is partly a product of the problems the body repeatedly solves. A smooth environment gives the body fewer problems. It removes tiny corrections before they are needed. It lets the feet become less curious, the ankles less responsive, the hips less involved, and the trunk less alert. Over time, the body may still be able to produce force, but it loses some of the background readiness that comes from moving through variation. This is why a person can feel strong in one simple movement and still feel uncertain on a rough path, a slippery surface, or a sudden change of direction. The body may have strength, but not the same woven strength that comes from constant correction. In a world of uneven ground, even walking was a form of whole-body practice. It asked for balance, timing, patience, and economy. The body could not waste movement recklessly, because every unnecessary motion had a cost. A person carrying food, tools, wood, water, or a child across unstable ground had to organize effort carefully. The feet found the path, the legs absorbed the surface, the trunk protected the center, the arms helped counterbalance, the breath settled the rhythm. Nothing worked alone. Modern life often removes this shared labor. Floors are level, shoes are cushioned, seats support the spine, rails and steps guide the body. Roads and vehicles reduce irregular distance. These changes make life safer, and they should not be dismissed. A stable surface can protect the injured, the elderly, the tired, and the vulnerable, but safety also changes the body's instructions. When instability disappears from daily life, the body receives fewer reminders to preserve the skills that instability once required. From the long view of human origins, strength was never only a question of muscle size. It was also the ability to remain organized when the world under the body did not stay still. The older landscape kept asking small questions with every step, and the body answered them so often that the answers became part of its ordinary capacity. Today, many of those questions have gone quiet. The ground no longer speaks to the body as often, and the body, hearing less, gradually becomes less prepared to answer. That quiet loss helps explain why strength now feels harder to keep. even when nothing obvious seems to have been taken away. A life shaped by unstable ground also shaped a different sense of balance. Balance was not only the ability to avoid falling, it was the ability to keep doing something while the world under the body kept changing. This matters because many modern movements happen inside protected lines. The floor is level, the seat is steady, the handle is fixed, the stair is regular, the path is predictable, and the body can trust the surface before it even moves. In older landscapes, trust had to be earned step by step. A person walking through wet soil, loose stones, forest roots, steep paths, dry grass, riverbanks, or frozen ground could not fully separate movement from attention. The body had to sense the world while entering it. The foot did not merely land, it tested. The knee did not merely bend, it absorbed. The hip did not merely carry, it corrected. The spine did not merely hold upright posture, it shifted quietly to keep the head, breath, and hands useful. Even if the task was simple, the setting made it complex. This is one reason older physical strength should be understood as environmental strength, not only muscular strength. A body became capable because the world gave it many small disturbances to answer. Those disturbances were not dramatic enough to become stories, but they were frequent enough to become biology. Across human origins, movement often happened without the guarantee of a prepared surface. No careful view of the past should treat every ancient path as harsh or every modern path as soft, because people have always modified their surroundings where they could. They cleared routes, chose easier passages, built shelters, used tools, and returned to familiar places. Yet even with these adjustments, the body remained more directly exposed to ground, weather, and material difficulty than many bodies are today. A familiar path could still be muddy after rain. A resting place could still require rising from the earth. A carried object could still shift its weight. A slope could still ask one side of the body to work differently from the other. These small asymmetries gave the body a repeated education in correction. Strength was not just built by heavy demand, it was built by uneven demand. Modern environments often remove unevenness before the body has to respond. They arrange the world so that both feet meet similar surfaces. Both sides of the body move in predictable patterns, and most loads are handled by furniture, wheels, containers, and machines. This creates comfort, but it also narrows the body's conversation with space. If the same movements repeat in the same protected way, the body may remain functional, but it receives fewer reasons to maintain wide readiness. The muscles that stabilize small errors are called less often. The joints that once adjusted through varied angles stay within smaller ranges. The nervous system receives fewer natural puzzles from the ground. Slowly, the body becomes more specialized for safety than for uncertainty. This change can be felt in ordinary moments. A rough path seems more demanding than it should. Carrying something across a slope feels awkward. Getting up from the ground feels less automatic. Turning while holding weight requires more attention. These are not signs that the body has forgotten everything. They are signs that the body has been living in a world that asks fewer uneven questions. The older human body, by contrast, was repeatedly reminded that strength had to remain flexible. It had to work when the surface tilted, when the load shifted, when distance continued after fatigue began, and when rest did not come with perfect support. That kind of strength was not separate from the environment. It was produced through contact with it. The body learned to stay organized because disorganization had immediate costs. If a foot slipped, another part had to recover. If a shoulder tired, the load had to be shared differently. If the ground rose unexpectedly, the breath and pace had to adjust. These repeated corrections kept the body from becoming too narrow in its abilities. In modern life, the absence of such corrections can make strength feel strangely fragile. It may be present under controlled conditions, but less available when the world becomes irregular again. This is part of the quiet answer to why you cannot stay strong like humans used to. The old environment did not simply make people move more, it made movement less predictable, and unpredictability kept the whole body involved. When life becomes smoother, strength does not vanish immediately, it becomes less practiced in the very situations that once kept it alive. The ground has been softened, straightened, and made safer, and the body has adapted to that safety by letting some of its older alertness fall silent. Weather added another layer of instability because the body was not shaped only by the ground beneath it, but also by the changing air around it. Heat, cold, wind, rain, dampness, dryness, seasonal shifts, and the simple lack of perfect shelter all changed how movement felt. A flat modern room hides this truth. It keeps the surface steady, the temperature controlled, the light predictable, and the body protected from many pressures before they can reach the skin. Older human environments did not offer that kind of separation. The body met the world more directly. Cold could make the hands less precise. Heat could make distance feel heavier. Rain could turn a familiar path into slippery ground. Wind could change balance. Darkness could slow movement. Damp clothing, rough coverings, exposed skin, and uneven shelter could all change how much effort a simple task required. These conditions did not create strength in a romantic way. They created demand. They asked the body to keep functioning when comfort was incomplete, and that repeated request helped shape a different physical expectation. In such a world, strength was not only the ability to push, pull, carry, or walk. It was the ability to remain organized while conditions shifted. A person might move more carefully in cold, shorten steps on wet ground, carry weight closer to the body in wind, or save effort when heat made every movement costly. These were not abstract lessons. They were practical adjustments written into the body through repetition. The beginning of human strength was therefore tied not just to movement, but to movement under changing conditions. No honest account should claim that early humans were always exposed or that they lacked all forms of protection. They made shelters, used fire, wore coverings, chose resting places, and shared knowledge. These were major human achievements. But even with these protections, life was still more physically open to the environment than many lives are today. Shelter reduced exposure. It did not erase it. Fire warmed a space. It did not make the whole world warm. A tool reduced effort. It did not remove the need for effort. The body still had to negotiate with weather, distance, material limits, and the uncertainty of what the next day would require. Modern stability changes this negotiation. It does not only reduce danger, it reduces variation. A controlled room asks less from circulation, posture, balance, grip, and pacing. A predictable temperature allows the body to move without adjusting to cold stiffness or heat fatigue. Artificial light allows attention to continue while physical movement decreases. Smooth roads and enclosed vehicles allow travel without the same bodily involvement. Again, these are real gains. They make life safer, longer, and less physically punishing for many people. But they also remove many of the small environmental challenges that once kept the body responsive. The body adapts not only to what it does, but to what it no longer has to withstand. If weather rarely interrupts movement, if ground rarely changes underfoot, if shelter is nearly constant, and if most physical discomfort is removed before it becomes a demand, the body receives fewer reasons to maintain broad readiness. This helps explain why modern weakness can feel so strange. A person may not feel lazy. A person may not feel inactive in the mind. Life may still feel full of pressure, yet the body may be living inside a narrow physical climate, with fewer natural changes asking it to adjust. Over time, strength becomes less connected to resilience across conditions and more connected to selected moments of effort. But selected effort is not the same as a life that quietly requires the body all day. In the older human setting, unstable ground and unstable weather worked together. The surface changed beneath the feet, and the air changed around the body. Each one altered the cost of movement. Each one kept the body from settling too deeply into one protected pattern. This does not mean the past was better. It means the past was physically louder. It spoke to the body through cold, heat, roughness, distance, weight, and uncertainty. The modern world has softened much of that voice, and when the world becomes quieter, the body listens to the quiet. It keeps what the present asks for, releases what the present does not ask for, and slowly becomes less prepared for the older kind of strength that once came from living inside instability. Energy shaped human strength in a way that modern life can easily hide. A body does not stay strong only because it moves. It stays strong because movement, food, effort, rest, and recovery are tied together in a balance that the body must continually manage. In the present, this balance is often separated into categories. Food is available apart from movement. Rest is available apart from physical exhaustion. Warmth, light, shelter, and transport can arrive with little bodily cost. A person may feel tired, but that tiredness may come from attention, worry, or repetition, rather than from the old pattern of using energy to meet the material needs of the day. In earlier human environments, energy was more tightly connected to action. Food did not appear without some form of search, preparation, carrying, sharing, or work. Warmth often required material effort. Distance required bodily cost. Even rest existed inside the memory of what had been spent and what might need to be spent again. This does not mean ancient people lived in constant hunger, or that every group faced the same scarcity. Human diets and conditions varied widely across landscapes, seasons, tools, and social arrangements. But the broader principle is careful and well accepted. The human body evolved under conditions where energy was not endlessly detached from physical effort. To obtain what the body needed, the body usually had to participate. That participation helped keep strength meaningful. Strength was not a luxury added after survival. It was part of the way energy was turned into survival. When the body carried, walked, dug, climbed, gathered, processed, built, lifted, or endured changing conditions, it was not simply spending energy. It was teaching its tissues why strength mattered. Muscles learned that effort would return. Bones learned that load was ordinary. Tendons learned that tension was part of life. The nervous system learned that movement had to be economical because energy could not be wasted without consequence. This is one reason older strength was likely practical rather than exaggerated. A body that spent all its energy too quickly would not be more successful simply because it could produce one dramatic effort. It needed enough strength to continue, enough efficiency to conserve, and enough recovery to answer the next demand. From the starting point of human life, strength and energy were therefore linked by necessity. The body had to remain capable, but it also had to remain careful. Modern stability changes that link. It can give the body energy without requiring much movement to obtain it, and it can remove effort without removing the intake of food. This creates a new situation for an ancient body. The body still follows biological rules formed through long adaptation, but the environment sends different signals. If energy arrives easily while physical demand decreases, the body does not automatically preserve strength at an older level. It may store, conserve, reduce, or reorganize. It may become efficient at stillness rather than efficient at movement. This is not a moral judgment. It is a biological response to a changed energy landscape. The quiet loss of strength begins where the body no longer has to spend itself in the ways that once reminded it to remain strong. A modern person may still feel that life is demanding, and in many ways it is, but the demand often falls unevenly. The mind is asked to continue, the eyes are asked to focus, the hands may repeat small motions, the body, as a whole, may be spared the larger energy cycle that once tied food, distance, load, weather, and recovery together. Over time, strength becomes less woven into the daily exchange between energy and survival. It becomes something separate from obtaining food, separate from warmth, separate from travel, separate from ordinary work. This separation is one of the deepest reasons the body can feel weaker even in a safer world. The old balance did not keep humans strong because it was comfortable. It kept strength present because energy had to move through the body before life could continue. When that movement is reduced, the body receives a quieter message. It no longer hears, every day, that strength is necessary for the next meal, the next distance, the next shelter, or the next return. And slowly, without drama, it begins to match that quieter world. The older energy balance also shaped strength by limiting how carelessly the body could spend itself. In a world where food, warmth, and safety were not guaranteed in the same way they are for many people now, the body could not treat effort as something separate from survival. Every movement had a cost, and that cost mattered because energy might be needed again before full recovery was possible. This does not mean that earlier humans were always hungry, always exhausted, or always living at the edge of collapse. That would be too extreme and too simple. Human groups developed many ways to reduce uncertainty. They shared food, remembered landscapes, used tools, followed seasonal knowledge, cooperated in labor, and built patterns of life that made survival more reliable. But even with these adaptations, the body remained closer to the true price of energy. To move meant to spend. To carry meant to spend. To search, gather, process, repair, walk, rise from the ground and return meant to spend. Strength had to exist within that spending, not outside it. This is why older human strength was likely tied to restraint as much as power. A body that used too much force too soon would tire. A body that moved without rhythm would waste energy. A body that could not recover enough would become less useful when the next demand arrived. The practical body learned to pace itself, to shift loads, to use posture, to save unnecessary motion, and to let many smaller systems share the work. From the long beginning of human life, this made strength something economical. It was not only the ability to produce effort, but the ability to keep effort from becoming ruinous. Modern life often changes this relationship in two opposite ways at once. It gives more access to energy, while reducing many ordinary reasons to spend energy through the whole body. Food can be obtained with little walking. Warmth can be created with little gathering. Travel can happen while sitting. Work can be mentally intense while physically narrow. This creates a strange condition for the body. Energy may be present, but the old full-body pathways for using it are quieter. The body may receive enough or more than enough fuel, yet fewer regular demands to turn that fuel into coordinated movement. Over time, the body becomes shaped by this new arrangement. It does not necessarily become weak because life is easy. It becomes less broadly strong because energy no longer has to pass through the same repeated physical channels. The muscles are asked less often to carry daily necessity. The bones receive fewer regular loads. The feet and hips are given fewer distances that cannot be avoided. The hands are given fewer varied materials to grip, twist, pull, and hold. A person may still feel drained, but the energy has often been spent through attention, stress, and time pressure rather than through the old exchange between body and environment. This difference is central to the question of why strength is harder to keep now. The body does not measure difficulty only by how serious life feels. It measures demand by what tissues are asked to do again and again. If the day is emotionally heavy but physically still, the body adapts to stillness. If the mind is occupied while the legs remain unused, the legs receive the message of reduced need. If the back is supported for many hours, the back learns that support is ordinary. In older environments, energy balance kept correcting the body. Too little capacity made the next task harder. Too much waste made recovery harder. The environment pressed the body toward a working middle, where strength, endurance, and economy had to cooperate. In the present, that correction is often delayed. A person can avoid many physical demands for a long time without immediate danger. The body is allowed to reduce capacity quietly because the surrounding world compensates. Machines, furniture, transport, stored food, and controlled rooms absorb much of the burden that once returned directly to muscle, bone, balance, and breath. This does not make modern life wrong. It shows how successful humans have been at removing hardship from daily existence, yet the body cannot fully separate safety from reduced demand. It responds to what is asked of it, and the older energy balance asked far more often for practical strength to remain available. When that balance changes, strength becomes less like a daily necessity and more like a fading language, still possible to speak, but no longer required by the world around the body. The energy balance of the past also made recovery a different kind of process. In modern life, recovery is often imagined as stopping, sitting, lying down, or removing effort as completely as possible. Rest becomes a pause from movement. But in older human conditions, recovery was usually not separated so cleanly from the next requirement of living. A person could rest, but the body still belonged to a world where fire might need attention, shelter might need repair, food might need preparation, children might need carrying, tools might need shaping, and the group might need to move again. This does not mean rest was absent. Rest is deeply human, and all living bodies need periods of reduced demand. The important difference is that rest was more often surrounded by future physical necessity. The body did not recover into a world that asked almost nothing of it. It recovered into a world that would ask again. That expectation shaped the meaning of strength. The body had to restore enough capacity to continue, not simply to feel comfortable. In this older pattern, energy, strength, and recovery formed a cycle. Effort spent energy. Food restored it when food was available. Rest repaired tissues and lowered strain. Then movement returned, and the body was tested again. The cycle was not perfect, and it could be harsh. Injury, hunger, sickness, cold, heat, pregnancy, age, and social conditions could all change what the body could do. But the body remained inside a feedback loop where physical capacity mattered repeatedly. If strength fell too far, the next journey, load, or task became harder. If recovery was incomplete, the body had to adjust its pace, share work, or reduce risk. From the beginning of human life, this relationship between effort and return helped keep the body honest. It did not allow strength to become an abstract idea. It tied strength to whether the body could enter the next day with enough readiness to answer ordinary demands. Modern stability softens this cycle. It can provide food without much movement, warmth without gathering, rest without previous whole-body labor, and safety without constant physical participation. These are enormous human achievements, and they should not be dismissed. Yet they change the biological information given to the body. Recovery can become disconnected from use. A person may rest for many hours after a day that exhausted the mind but left much of the body underused. The body may be tired, but not in the old integrated way that involved legs, back, feet, hands, balance, breath, and load. This creates a confusing state. The person wants recovery, but the body has not received the full range of signals that once made recovery meaningful. Muscles that were not used much do not rebuild broad capacity. Bones that were not loaded much do not receive the same reminder. Balance that was not challenged does not sharpen itself merely because time passes. Rest alone cannot maintain strength if the pattern of use has become too narrow. This is one of the quiet reasons modern strength can fade, even in a life that feels exhausting. Exhaustion is real, but it is often distributed strength. The eyes may be tired, the attention may be tired, the nervous system may feel pressed by noise, time, worry, and constant decision. But the body's older systems of strength may remain undercooled. They do not grow from stress alone. They grow from repeated physical demand followed by enough recovery to adapt. In earlier human environments, that demand and recovery were more closely linked to the material facts of life. The body moved because life required movement, then recovered because it had to move again. Today, the body can be spared from demand, so often that recovery no longer points back towards strength. It may simply return the person to another period of support, sitting, and narrow movement. Over time, the energy balance that once helped maintain capability becomes loosened. Strength no longer sits inside the daily cycle of effort, food, rest, and return. It becomes detached from survival and placed into choice. That detachment is gentle, but its effects accumulate. The body is still adaptable, still responsive, still carrying old capacities beneath the surface. But it waits for a cycle that modern life often interrupts. Demand that is frequent enough to matter, varied enough to involve the whole body, and followed by recovery that prepares the body to answer again. Without that cycle, strength does not disappear as a punishment. It fades because the old conversation between energy and necessity has become quieter than the body was built to expect. Strength did not begin only in adulthood. It began much earlier, in the way a body grew up inside a world that kept asking for movement before movement had a name. A modern person often imagines strength as something gained later, after childhood, after school, after work begins, after the body becomes an object to improve or maintain. But the human body does not wait until adulthood to learn what kind of world it is living in. From early life, bones, muscles, balance, posture, grip, coordination, and confidence in movement respond to the pattern of ordinary days. If those days contain varied ground, carrying, climbing, crouching, reaching, rising from the earth, walking with others, and using the hands for practical tasks, the growing body receives one kind of education. If those days contain long sitting, smooth floors, supported posture, carried objects that are light or handled by adults, and movement separated into short planned periods, the growing body receives another. This difference matters because strength is not only stored in tissue, it is also learned through familiarity. A child who repeatedly moves through a physically demanding environment does not need to understand the word strength to develop a body that expects use. The body learns through doing. It learns how far to step, how to catch balance, how to squat and rise, how to carry a small load without stiffening, how to recover from ordinary fatigue, and how to trust movement as part of life. In earlier human communities, childhood would have varied widely across climate, food systems, social structure, safety, and family life. It would be careless to pretend there was one single ancient childhood, yet the broad historical point remains careful and reasonable. Many human generations grew up closer to the material work of living than many children do today. They saw food being gathered, prepared, stored, or shared. They saw tools used by hand. They saw shelters made, repaired, or moved around. They followed adults across land, watched bodies coordinate with terrain, and gradually entered tasks at the scale their age allowed. Strength was not handed to them as a separate lesson. It was absorbed through participation in a world where the body mattered. This generational pattern helped keep strength continuous. A body that grows up under frequent demand does not experience movement as an interruption. It experiences stillness and movement as parts of the same life. The feet become accustomed to the ground before the person thinks about fitness. The hands become accustomed to objects before work is named. The back and hips become accustomed to changing posture before posture becomes a concern. Such early familiarity can make physical readiness feel natural, because the body has been shaped by it from the beginning. Modern life often changes the first lessons. Many children and adults are protected from rough surfaces, long distances, heavy loads, weather, and repeated practical movement. This protection is often loving and useful. It reduces injury, danger, exhaustion, and exposure. But it also means the body may grow up with fewer ordinary reasons to become broadly capable. Movement becomes scheduled, supervised, measured, or reduced to play and exercise rather than woven into the necessities around the household, landscape, and community. Over generations, this changes the baseline. Each generation may inherit the same biological body, but not the same physical world. The genes may not change much across a few centuries, but the daily instructions given to the body can change dramatically. This is why the question of strength is not only personal, it is historical. You are not simply comparing yourself with one ancient individual. You are comparing modern bodies raised inside modern arrangements with long lines of bodies that grew up under different demands. The older world trained people before they knew they were being trained, not by design, but by repeated contact with necessity. The modern world often protects people before they know what protection is removing. This does not make modern bodies doomed or ancient bodies superior. It shows that strength is partly a generational atmosphere. It is shaped by what children watch, what adults repeat, what tasks remain close to the body, and what the environment silently asks day after day. When those questions become softer across generations, the body's answer becomes softer too. As generations grew within environments that required movement, the body did not only learn how to move, it learned what movement was for. This distinction is quiet but important. When movement is tied to real tasks, it carries meaning that the body can recognize without explanation. Carrying is not just lifting. It is bringing something needed from one place to another. Walking is not just stepping. It is reaching water, food, people, or safety. Bending is not just a motion. It is gathering, building, or preparing. These meanings shape how often the body returns to the same kinds of actions, and how consistently different parts of the body are involved. In earlier human settings, children and adults would have seen movement connected to outcome. A path led somewhere. A load changed something. A repeated action produced a visible result. This connection made physical use regular, without needing separate motivation. The body returned to similar patterns because life itself returned to them. From a biological perspective, repetition with purpose is powerful. It gives the body clear signals about what to maintain. If walking leads to something needed, walking is repeated. If carrying changes survival, carrying is repeated. If balance prevents falling on uneven ground, balance is used again and again. Over time, these repeated patterns create a wide base of capability. The body does not specialize too early in one narrow action, because the environment keeps asking for variation. The hands grasp different shapes. The feet meet different surfaces. The trunk rotates, stabilizes, and adjusts in multiple directions. The breath follows changing rhythms. Strength grows across this variation because it is asked to support many kinds of movement, not just one. In the modern world, this connection between movement and outcome is often weakened. Many necessary results can be achieved without much bodily involvement. Food can be obtained without long travel. Objects can be moved without being carried by hand. Work can be completed with minimal change in posture. Communication can happen without physical presence. As a result, movement becomes less tied to necessity and more tied to intention. A person must decide to move rather than being drawn into movement by the structure of daily life. This shift changes how often the body repeats useful patterns. When movement is optional, it competes with many other demands on time and attention. When movement is separated from outcome, it can feel less urgent, even if it is still valuable. Over generations, this difference shapes what the body expects. A child growing up in an environment where most results arrive without physical effort may not receive the same repeated signals that once guided development. The body still has the capacity to adapt, but adaptation depends on what is done regularly, not on what is possible in theory. This is why strength can feel harder to maintain even when opportunities for movement exist. The body is not responding to possibilities. It is responding to patterns. In earlier generations, the pattern often included frequent, varied, and meaningful movement. In many modern settings, the pattern includes long periods of reduced physical demand interrupted by short, deliberate activity. This interruption can build certain abilities, but it may not recreate the continuous, integrated use that once kept strength widely distributed across the body. The difference is not only in quantity, it is in structure. Older patterns ask the body to move in response to the world. Modern patterns often ask the body to move in response to a decision. The body adapts to both, but the results are not the same. From the viewpoint of human origins, this explains why strength once seemed to remain present without being constantly managed. It was not being managed. It was being used. Each generation inherited not only a biological form, but a way of living that kept that form active. When that way of living changes, the inheritance becomes incomplete. The body arrives prepared for one kind of world but grows inside another. Over time, the gap between preparation and experience widens, and strength becomes something that no longer follows automatically from daily life. Across many generations, this pattern did not simply shape individual bodies, it shaped what felt normal to a community. When most people around you move in similar ways, carry similar loads, walk similar distances, and respond to similar environments, the body's expectations are reinforced socially as well as physically. A child watching adults rise from the ground, walk across uneven land, carry objects with care, and adjust to weather without special preparation is not only learning movements. The child is learning that these movements belong to ordinary life. They are not events. They are not separate practices. They are simply how a body exists in the world. This shared expectation creates a quiet continuity. The body does not need constant reminders to move, because movement is already present in the surrounding behavior of others. The rhythm of a group can sustain the rhythm of a body. In earlier human settings, this collective pattern likely helped maintain strength without requiring deliberate effort to preserve it. People did not have to decide, again and again, to stay physically capable. The environment and the community made capability useful, and usefulness kept it alive. This does not mean every individual was equally strong or equally active. Age, injury, pregnancy, illness, and social roles all influenced what a person could do. But even with these differences, the general pattern of life often included visible, repeated physical engagement. Strength was not hidden in specialized spaces. It was part of shared activity, visible in how people moved through the day. Over time, this visibility helped stabilize expectations. A body that drifted too far from practical capability would encounter limits that were difficult to ignore because the surrounding world did not fully compensate. The group might adjust, support, or redistribute tasks, but the physical reality of movement, carrying, and environment still set a boundary. Modern life alters this shared pattern in subtle ways. Physical activity becomes less visible in daily routines. Many necessary tasks are performed by systems that do not require the body in the same direct manner. Work can happen while sitting, communication can happen without traveling, and goods can arrive without being carried by the person who uses them. As a result, the social signal changes. A person may spend much of the day surrounded by others who are also physically still. Movement becomes something that happens in specific places and times, rather than something woven through the whole day. This reduces the background pressure that once kept the body engaged. Without that shared expectation, strength becomes more individual and less supported by the environment. A person must choose to move in a way that may not be mirrored by the immediate social setting. Over generations, this shift becomes normal. Children grow up seeing less integrated physical activity in the people around them. They learn that stillness is a common state, and that movement belongs to selected contexts rather than to life as a whole. The body adapts to what it sees as normal. If normal includes long periods of supported posture, short distances, and limited variation, the body prepares for that pattern. This does not mean that modern communities lack activity. People still walk, work, lift, and play, but the distribution has changed. Activity is often concentrated rather than continuous. It is separated from many of the tasks that once required it. This separation weakens the quiet reinforcement that earlier generations received from simply living among others. From the perspective of human origins, strength was not only maintained by individual effort, it was supported by a collective environment that made physical capability part of ordinary existence. When that environment changes, the burden shifts toward the individual. Strength must be maintained with intention, because it is no longer carried forward by the shared structure of daily life. This is one of the deeper reasons the question feels personal, even though it is historical. You may feel that your body is losing something, but what it is losing may not be a trait that belonged only to you. It may be a pattern that once belonged to many people moving together through a world that kept asking for it, and that pattern has become quieter across generations. Stability entered human life slowly, not as a single invention that suddenly made the body weak, but as a long series of changes that altered what the body had to do each day. The first forms of stability were not modern comfort. They were fragile, incomplete, and often mixed with new kinds of labor. A settled place still required building, repairing, carrying, planting, storing, grinding, walking, lifting, and guarding against uncertainty. Early farming life could be physically demanding, and in some settings it may have brought harder work, less varied diets, disease risks, and new pressures on the body. So the story cannot be told as if humans were once strong, then simply became settled and weak. That would be too easy, and it would not be honest. The deeper change was more gradual. As people began to stay closer to certain places, return to the same landscape, store food, manage plants or animals, and build more durable shelters, the body's relationship with movement began to shift. Life still required effort, but effort became organized differently. Distance did not disappear, yet some forms of searching became more predictable. Food did not become effortless, yet some of its timing and location became more controllable. Shelter did not remove labor, yet it placed more of life around fixed spaces. This slow arrival of stability changed the pattern of physical demand. The body was still used, but not always in the same varied way that a more mobile life would have required. Repetition became more concentrated. Certain tasks were done again and again in the same places, with the same tools, along the same paths, around the same settlements. This could build strength in some ways while narrowing it in others. A person who repeatedly grinds grain, carries water, works soil, builds fences, or lifts stored materials may develop powerful endurance for those tasks. But the broader relationship with landscape changes when life is anchored more firmly in one place. The body still meets effort, but the effort becomes tied to settlement, storage, property, crops, animals, and repeated labor cycles. From the point of human origins, this is a major turn. Earlier movement often followed shifting resources across wider spaces. Settled life increasingly drew the body around fields, homes, paths, and work zones that returned day after day. This was not a loss of all strength. It was a transformation in the kind of strength that life asked for. The old whole-body readiness, shaped by broad variation, began to share space with more specialized labor. The body became useful in new ways, but some older demands became less constant. Over generations, this mattered. A child born into a settled community did not grow up with the same movement map as a child in a highly mobile group. The surrounding world had different edges. There were stored things, fixed structures, repeated paths, and daily tasks linked to place. Stability gave humans something powerful: memory anchored in land, food that could sometimes be saved, social life that could grow denser, and structures that could outlast a single night. But it also began the long process of moving some survival problems away from the whole moving body and into systems outside the body. A granary stores what the body once had to search for again. A fence shapes space before the body crosses it. A path hardens under repeated use. A house protects sleep from some of the pressures that once reached the skin. Each of these changes can be helpful, but each also changes the body's instructions. Strength no longer comes only from moving through uncertain land. It begins to come from repeated work within a more controlled human environment. This is the quiet beginning of the modern problem. Not weakness, not decline, not a simple fall from a stronger past, but a slow transfer of demand from the body into arrangements the body created. Humans became safer by making the world more stable. Yet as the world became more stable, the body began receiving fewer of the older signals that once kept broad strength alive. The question becomes deeper here. What happens when the same intelligence that protects the body also removes some of the pressures that taught the body how to remain strong? As stability continued to grow, the body began to experience a different kind of repetition, one that was tied more tightly to place and task than to wide movement across changing environments. This repetition did not remove effort. In many cases, it concentrated effort into narrower patterns that were performed again and again. A person might walk the same path to water, return along the same route, carry similar loads, work the same soil, use the same tools, and repeat these actions across days and seasons. This kind of life could be physically demanding, but its demands were more predictable. The body learned what to expect, and in learning what to expect, it also began to lose some of the need to prepare for what could not be expected. In earlier human settings, variation itself was a form of training. The body met different surfaces, distances, and problems that required constant adjustment. In a more settled environment, many of those variations became organized into routines. The ground beneath a repeated path became smoother. The distance between key places became familiar. The load carried might still be heavy, but its shape and handling could become known. The work done each day might still be tiring, but its pattern could become more fixed. This shift matters, because strength does not only depend on how much effort is used, it also depends on how varied that effort is. When the body solves the same physical problem in the same way over and over, it becomes efficient at that problem, but less prepared for others. Certain muscles, joints, and movement patterns are reinforced, while others are called less often. Over time, the body becomes more specialized. This specialization is not inherently negative. It allows people to become skilled, productive, and reliable in the tasks that sustain their community. But it changes the distribution of strength. The body may become strong in the movements it repeats, while gradually losing some of the broader readiness that once came from constant variation. This is one of the subtle turning points in human physical history. Strength begins to separate into types. There is strength for carrying water, strength for working soil, strength for lifting stored goods, strength for building, strength for repetitive hand use. Each of these can be well developed, but they do not always require the same full-body coordination that varied movement across changing terrain once demanded. The body is still active, but its activity becomes organized around function within a stable setting rather than adaptation across an unpredictable landscape. Modern life extends this process even further. Tasks become more specific, more supported, and often less physically demanding in the traditional sense. The path to water becomes a pipe, the carried load becomes a container moved by wheels, the repeated route becomes a road or a corridor. The tool becomes a machine that reduces the range of motion required from the body. Work becomes segmented into roles that may use only a small part of the body for long periods. This does not remove effort entirely. It changes its shape. A person may spend hours using the hands in a narrow way, or maintaining a seated posture, or repeating a limited set of movements that do not require the full body to organize itself. Over time, this narrowing reduces the body's exposure to diverse physical challenges. The nervous system receives fewer signals that demand coordination across many joints and directions. The balance systems are asked less often to respond to unpredictable shifts. The muscles that support small corrections are used less frequently. Even when effort is present, it may not involve the same range of systems that once worked together during ordinary movement. From the perspective of human origins, this explains why strength can feel uneven in the modern body. A person may be capable in specific tasks but less confident in unfamiliar movement. The body has adapted to repetition without variation. It has become efficient where it is used and less prepared where it is not. This is not a failure of will or effort. It is a reflection of the environment shaping the body through what it repeats. The slow arrival of stability did not remove strength. It began to reshape it, moving from a broad, environment-driven readiness toward a more task-centered form. And as that process continues into modern life, the body receives fewer invitations to maintain the wide, flexible strength that once came from living inside constant variation. Stability also changed the body by changing what could be postponed. In a more mobile or less predictable life, many physical needs had to be answered close to the moment they appeared. If water was needed, someone had to reach it. If a shelter needed repair, the work could not always wait. If food had to be gathered, prepared, carried, or shared, the body was often drawn into the task before long delay was possible. But as settled life developed, humans became better at storing, planning, arranging, and protecting. These abilities were not small achievements. They allowed groups to survive difficult seasons, support larger communities, preserve food, build more lasting spaces, and reduce some of the risks that had pressed directly on the body. Yet every system that made postponement possible also changed the body's daily instructions. Stored food meant that hunger did not always require immediate movement across land. A fixed shelter meant that rest could happen in a more protected place. A repeated path meant that the body no longer had to solve a new route each time. A built container, a tool, a fence, a wall, or a shared storehouse moved part of survival from muscle and balance into human-made structure. The body was still needed, but not always with the same urgency or range. This is where stability becomes more than comfort. It becomes a new environment. The human body, which had developed through direct contact with changing surroundings, began living inside surroundings increasingly shaped by human decisions. The ground around a settlement could be cleared, paths could be worn smooth, tasks could be organized by time and role. Some people might repeat certain forms of labor more often, while others performed different work. The body's contact with the world became filtered through settlement. This did not make life easy. Early settled communities could face hunger, disease, hard labor, conflict, and heavy physical demands. But the pattern of demand changed from broad unpredictability toward organized repetition and delayed necessity. The older landscape asked the whole body many small questions. The settled landscape began asking some questions more often and others less often. Over generations, this changed what strength meant. It was no longer only readiness for a shifting world, it was also endurance within routines, skill within repeated tasks, and capacity within a more structured life. Modern life is a distant continuation of this process. The ability to postpone physical effort has become far greater. Food can wait in a refrigerator, water waits in pipes, heat waits in a switch, distance waits inside vehicles, communication waits inside devices, work waits on screens. The body can remain still while many needs are handled by systems built across long human history. This is not a rejection of those systems. They are evidence of human intelligence, cooperation, and memory. But they place the body in a strange position. The body is surrounded by the achievements of its own species, and those achievements reduce the very pressures that once kept broad strength present. A person may still live a demanding life, but the demand often arrives through schedules, attention, responsibility, and emotion more than through varied physical necessity. The body may be tired from being awake, alert, and pressured, yet still underused in the older sense. From the viewpoint of human origins, this is the deeper meaning of stability. It did not simply make humans weaker. It taught the body that many problems could be solved outside the body. At first, this transfer was partial. Later, it became larger. Today, it can be almost invisible. A person may not notice how many tasks no longer require lifting, walking, carrying, bending, balancing, or adjusting to weather, because the absence of effort feels normal. But the body notices in its own way. It reduces what is not called upon. It narrows what is not used. It becomes efficient inside the stable world it has been given. The slow arrival of stability therefore helps explain why staying strong now is so different from staying strong in earlier conditions. Strength once had to remain close because need was close. Now need is often mediated by objects, buildings, machines, and systems. The body still carries the old capacity to answer a hard-pressed world, time, but the stable world asks that capacity to sleep more often than it asks it to act. This is not a fall from greatness. It is a quiet trade. Humans made life safer by placing more strength into the world around them, and the body, receiving fewer direct demands, slowly learned to hold less strength inside itself. Comfort did not arrive as softness first. It arrived as relief. A sharper tool, a better shelter, a warmer covering, a smoother path, a stronger container, a stored supply, a repeated route, a shared task, a wheel, a handle, a wall, a roof. Each of these things reduced some pressure that once passed through the body. This is the important point. Comfort was not originally a shallow desire. It was part of the human attempt to survive, with less unnecessary suffering. To make life less dangerous, humans learned to move difficulty away from flesh and into objects, habits, places, and systems. A tool took over part of the hand's burden. A container made carrying more organized. A shelter reduced exposure to cold, wind, rain, and darkness. A path made the ground more predictable. A stored food supply reduced the need to search every time hunger returned. None of these changes made the body useless. They made the body more effective by lowering certain costs. But over long historical time, every reduction in cost also changed what the body had to maintain. The body that once met the world directly began meeting the world through layers of human-made support. This is where comfort begins to replace necessity, not suddenly and not completely, but quietly. The body still moves, but it moves with help. It still carries, but carrying becomes assisted. It still rests, but rest becomes more protected. It still travels, but travel becomes more guided. It still works, but work becomes more shaped by tools than by raw bodily contact with the environment. From the starting point of human origins, this is one of the most remarkable features of our species. Humans did not only adapt their bodies to the world, they adapted the world around their bodies. That ability allowed survival in cold regions, dry regions, forests, coasts, grasslands, mountains, and dense settlements. It allowed groups to pass knowledge across generations and make life less exposed to immediate danger. Yet the body pays attention to the changed arrangement. When a tool reduces strain, the body receives less strain. When a shelter reduces exposure, the body receives less exposure. When a path reduces instability, the body receives less instability. When storage reduces urgency, the body receives less urgency. These are gains for safety, but they are also fewer signals telling the body to keep older capacities fully awake. Modern comfort is the far end of this long process. It surrounds the body before the body has to ask. Seats support the spine. Floors flatten the ground. Machines move weight. Devices gather information. Climate control softens weather. Food systems shorten the distance between hunger and eating. Transport removes much of the work of crossing space. The body is still alive inside all of this, but it is often no longer the main instrument through which need is answered. This can make strength feel optional in a way it was not before. A person can pass through many hours meeting needs, completing tasks, and remaining socially connected while asking very little from the whole body. The mind may be active, the eyes may be active, the fingers may be active, but the feet, hips, trunk, shoulders, breath, balance, and grip may be waiting. Over time, waiting becomes information. The body interprets reduced demand as a reason to reduce readiness. This does not mean comfort is the enemy of strength. That would be too simple and too false. Comfort protects the vulnerable, reduces injury, supports recovery, and makes many forms of human life possible. The problem is not comfort itself. The problem is that comfort can become so complete that necessity no longer reaches the body often enough to keep strength naturally present. The older world asks for strength without needing a plan. The modern world often asks for comfort first, and strength only later, if a person deliberately makes room for it. This quiet reversal helps explain why you cannot stay strong like humans used to. The body has not forgotten its past. It has simply moved into a world where more and more of that past has been softened before it can touch the skin, the feet, the hands, or the breath. Comfort becomes powerful because it often removes effort before the body has time to notice that effort has disappeared. A chair does not announce that the hips, spine, and feet are doing less work. A smooth floor does not tell the ankles that their small corrections are no longer needed. A handle, a wheel, a cart, a pipe, a switch, or a machine does not explain that it has taken over part of the body's older task. These changes appear as ordinary convenience. They are so familiar that they become invisible. Yet the body responds to invisible things as much as visible ones. It does not need to understand history in order to adapt to the present. It only needs the present to repeat itself. When support repeats, the body learns support. When flatness repeats, the body learns flatness. When sitting repeats, the body learns sitting. When machines repeat the work of lifting, carrying, heating, cooling, transporting, and preparing, the body learns that many older forms of strength are less necessary. This is why comfort can replace necessity without ever feeling like a loss. It feels like improvement, and in many ways it is improvement. A roof protects sleep. A stored supply protects hunger. A smoother road protects travel. A safer room protects the tired, the young, the injured, and the old. Human beings did not build comfort because they wanted to become weak. They built it because exposure, uncertainty, and constant labor could be dangerous and exhausting. But from the body's point of view, comfort is not only protection, it is also instruction. It tells the body what no longer has to be done. In early human life, and in many traditional forms of labor across history, the body often received instruction from direct contact with matter. Wood had weight, water had distance, soil had resistance, stone had hardness, wind and cold had pressure. Food required handling, processing, and movement. These material facts called the body into participation. They did not ask whether the person wanted a workout. They simply required the body to be involved. Modern comfort changes the amount of participation required. The same needs may still exist, but they reach the body through systems that reduce contact. Water comes through a pipe instead of a journey. Heat comes from a device instead of gathered fuel. Food comes through storage, delivery, markets, and kitchens that separate eating from much of the bodily work that once surrounded it. Distance is crossed in a seat. Communication crosses space without the body crossing it. This transformation is not a single event in history. It is a long human habit to solve physical problems by building outside the body. The success of that habit has made life more stable, but it has also made strength easier to leave unused. The body remains biological, responsive, and old in its basic rules. It still needs repeated signals to maintain capacity, but the environment increasingly sends signals of assistance. Over time, this creates a kind of physical silence. The hands are not asked to grip many different textures. The shoulders are not asked to stabilize shifting loads. The feet are not asked to interpret uneven ground. The breath is not asked to pace long movement through changing air. The body can complete a day while many of its older systems remain quiet. This quietness accumulates. It becomes easier to feel stiff after stillness, uncertain on rough ground, tired after carrying, or surprised by tasks that once would have been built into ordinary life. The modern person may wonder why strength has become hard to keep, but the body has been receiving the answer every day. It has been told, gently and repeatedly, that less strength is required. From the long view of human origins, comfort is therefore not the opposite of survival. It is one of survival's greatest achievements. But it changes the environment that survival created. The same species that needed strong bodies learned to construct a world that reduces the need for strong bodies. That is the quiet paradox at the center of this story. We became intelligent enough to protect ourselves from many old demands, and the body, protected from those demands, began to adapt as if they were no longer part of life. Comfort also changes the meaning of rest. In an older human setting, rest often came after the body had been used in many ways. Walking, carrying, bending, reaching, balancing, preparing food, tending fire, working with tools, moving through weather, and sharing physical tasks with others. Rest did not erase the body's involvement with the world. It followed involvement. The muscles had been asked to coordinate, the bones had carried load, the feet had crossed ground, the hands had handled materials, the breath had adjusted to pace, heat, cold, distance, and effort. When the body rested, it was often recovering from a day in which many systems had been called into use. Modern comfort can create a different kind of rest, one that follows long stillness rather than whole-body demand. A person may sit for hours, feel tired, and then rest again, not because the body has been broadly used, but because attention, stress, and routine have drained the mind. This tiredness is real, but it does not send the same signals to muscle, bone, balance, grip, and coordination. The body may be resting from pressure, but not recovering from useful movement. This is one of the quiet ways comfort replaces necessity. It does not only reduce work, it can reduce the kind of work that makes rest meaningful for strength. From the beginning of human life, rest and effort were not enemies. They belonged to one cycle. The body spent energy, then restored it. It carried load, then repaired. It met weather, then sought shelter. It crossed distance, then slowed down. Strength lived inside this cycle because the next demand was never fully removed from life. Today, comfort can interrupt the cycle by giving rest without previous physical use, protection without exposure, food without movement, and warmth without labor. These gifts make life safer, but they also allow the body to remain underused while still feeling tired. Over time, this can make strength feel strangely distant. The person may want more rest, but the body may need a different kind of signal. Not danger, not punishment, not harshness, but ordinary physical use that tells it what must be preserved. The modern world often offers the opposite signal. It surrounds the body with soft surfaces, controlled temperatures, easy access, and tools that reduce strain before strain appears. The body then adapts to being spared. It becomes efficient at sitting, supported posture, short walking, narrow hand movement, and quick transitions between protected spaces. This efficiency is not useless. It fits the world many people live in, but it does not maintain the broader strength that came from repeated physical negotiation with matter, distance, and weather. The old strength was never just force. It was the ability to return from rest into real demand without feeling like the body had been taken by surprise. Comfort weakens this link when it makes rest deeper than demand. The body spends less, receives support more often, and then has fewer reasons to rebuild wide capacity. This does not mean humans should reject comfort or return to hardship. That would be neither honest nor useful. The value of this history is not to romanticize the past. It is to see the trade clearly. Human beings built comfort to protect life, and that protection is one of our greatest achievements. But the body still follows an older biological logic. It maintains what is used, it softens what is spared, and it becomes fluent in the environment it repeats most often. If that environment is mainly comfortable, stable, and physically quiet, strength slowly becomes less automatic. It no longer rises out of the day itself. It has to be called back from the edges of life, because the center of life no longer asks for it as strongly as before. In this sense, comfort does not simply make the body weak. It changes what the body believes is necessary. It teaches the body that the world is softer, closer, flatter, warmer, and more supported than the world in which its deep capacities were formed. The body accepts that lesson patiently. It does not argue for the past. It adjusts to the present. And with each adjustment, the older form of strength becomes a little less like an ordinary state and a little more like a memory waiting for demand to return. A body without continuous demand does not suddenly become weak. It becomes quieter first. The signals that once moved through it begin to arrive less often, and when they arrive, they are shorter, narrower, and more predictable. This quietness is easy to miss because life can still feel full. A person may complete many tasks, think constantly, respond to messages, meet responsibilities, and move from one obligation to another. But beneath that activity, the body may be receiving only fragments of the physical conversation that once kept it broadly capable. The feet may touch mostly flat ground. The legs may walk short distances. The hands may repeat small, precise motions. The back may remain supported. The breath may rarely need to adjust to long effort. These fragments are not useless, but they do not add up to the same pattern of use that once shaped human strength. In earlier human conditions, the body was rarely allowed to remain in one physical state for long. Standing could become walking. Walking could become carrying. Carrying could become bending. Bending could become lifting. Lifting could become walking again. The transitions were frequent, and the body had to organize itself across them without a clear boundary between one action and the next. This continuity mattered because it kept many systems engaged at the same time. Balance, coordination, grip, posture, and endurance were not trained separately. They were used together, again and again, in response to ordinary needs. Modern life often separates these systems. A person may sit for long periods, then stand briefly, then sit again. Movement becomes segmented, and each segment may involve only a small part of the body. The transitions become sharper. The body moves from stillness to action without the gradual build that older patterns provided. Over time, this separation changes what the body expects. It learns that it can remain inactive for long stretches without consequence. It learns that effort will be brief. It learns that support will be available. As a result, it reduces the background readiness that once made movement feel natural. This is why strength can feel less stable. It is not only about how much force the body can produce in a moment. It is about how easily the body can enter movement after stillness, how smoothly it can connect different actions, and how well it can sustain effort without needing to stop. A body that is not asked to do these things regularly will not maintain them at the same level. From the perspective of human origins, continuous demand acted as a constant reminder. The body was told, day after day, that it needed to be ready. Not ready for extreme effort, but ready for ordinary effort that could not be avoided. This readiness was maintained not by intensity, but by repetition. It was reinforced by the fact that life itself did not pause long enough for the body to forget. In the modern world, pauses are longer and more complete. A person can move from activity to complete stillness and remain there for hours. The body is given time to reduce its engagement, and because that reduction is repeated, it becomes normal. When movement returns, it can feel unfamiliar, even if the action itself is simple. The body has not been kept in a state of quiet preparation. It has been allowed to turn off many of the systems that once remained partially active throughout the day. This turning off is efficient. It saves energy in a world where energy is no longer tied to immediate survival. But it also means that strength must be reactivated each time rather than carried forward. The result is a body that may still be capable in isolated efforts, but less consistent across the whole day. It may perform well when asked directly, yet feel slow to respond in ordinary moments. This is one of the central changes brought by a life without continuous demand. Strength does not disappear. It becomes conditional. It appears when called, and fades when not used, because the body no longer receives the steady stream of signals that once kept it quietly alive in the background of daily life. When continuous demand disappears, movement begins to break into pieces. Each piece may still be correct on its own, but the connection between them weakens. A person may stand, then sit, then walk a short distance, then sit again, then lift something briefly, then return to stillness. None of these actions is wrong. The problem is not the action itself, but the lack of continuity between actions. In earlier human conditions, movement flowed more easily from one form into another. The body did not need to restart each time. It was already in motion, already coordinating, already balancing, already breathing in a way that supported effort. In a fragmented pattern, the body is asked to move from stillness into action repeatedly, without the gradual preparation that continuous movement provides. This repeated starting and stopping changes how strength is experienced. It becomes less like a steady background and more like something that has to be summoned. Each time the body begins to move, it must reorganize itself. Muscles that have been quiet must wake up. Joints that have been held in one position must adjust. Balance systems that have been inactive must respond quickly. This can make even simple tasks feel heavier than they should. The body is not only performing the action, it is also overcoming the gap created by stillness. Over time, this gap becomes familiar. The body learns that it will often be inactive and that effort will come in short bursts. It adapts by becoming efficient at stillness and less prepared for sustained or varied movement. This does not remove the ability to be strong, but it changes the conditions under which strength appears. Strength may be present when the body is deliberately engaged, but less present in the transitions that fill ordinary life. From the perspective of human origins, this difference is significant. The older pattern did not require the body to restart itself so often. Movement was part of a longer chain, and that chain kept many systems partially active. Even when effort was not intense, the body remained involved. In the modern pattern, involvement can drop to a low level for extended periods. When it rises again, it does so abruptly. This abruptness places a different kind of demand on the body. Instead of maintaining readiness, it must repeatedly rebuild it. This rebuilding can feel like effort, even if the action itself is not complex. It can also lead to a sense that the body is less reliable, because its performance varies depending on how long it has been inactive. A task that feels easy at one moment may feel difficult at another, not because the task has changed, but because the body's state has changed. Fragmented movement also reduces the number of small corrections that once supported strength. In continuous movement, the body is constantly adjusting, even in subtle ways. These adjustments keep balance, coordination, and joint stability active. When movement is broken into short segments, many of these adjustments do not occur as often. The body spends more time in fixed positions and less time responding to variation. This reduces the quiet practice that once maintained broad capability. Modern life encourages this pattern because it is efficient for many tasks. Sitting allows focus. Short movements save time. Tools and systems reduce the need for prolonged physical effort. These advantages are real, but they come with a change in how the body is used. The body becomes less like a continuously engaged system and more like a tool that is picked up and put down. When it is picked up, it can still perform. When it is put down, it becomes quiet again. Over time, this rhythm shapes what feels normal. Continuous movement begins to feel unusual, while stillness feels expected. This shift helps explain why strength can feel difficult to maintain. The body is no longer living in a pattern that naturally supports it. It is living in a pattern that requires it to return to strength again and again, without the continuity that once made that return unnecessary. A body without continuous demand eventually begins to lose not only strength, but trust in its own strength. This trust is not a thought at first. It is a bodily feeling. It is the quiet confidence that the foot will find the ground, the legs will rise without hesitation, the back will carry for a while, the hands will grip without uncertainty, and the breath will settle into effort rather than resist it. When movement is frequent and varied, this confidence is renewed many times a day. The body learns that it can answer ordinary demands because it is answering them already. But when demand becomes rare, narrow, or broken into short pieces, the body receives fewer chances to confirm its own ability. Strength may still exist, but the sense of easy access to strength begins to fade. A person may approach a task with more caution than before. Lifting something from the floor feels less automatic. Walking over uneven ground creates a small hesitation. Rising after long sitting feels like a negotiation instead of a simple transition. These moments are not only physical, They reveal a body that has been asked less often to prove to itself that it remains ready. In the older human environment, this kind of trust was reinforced by the shape of daily life. The body did not have to wonder whether it could move after stillness, because stillness was rarely isolated from movement for very long. It did not have to wonder whether it could adjust to a rough surface, because rough surfaces were part of the ordinary world. It did not have to wonder whether it could carry a load, because carrying appeared again and again in practical life. This does not mean earlier humans never felt pain, fear, fatigue, or limitation. They certainly did. But the body's relationship with movement was more regularly tested, and regular testing creates familiarity. Familiarity reduces hesitation. Modern life can remove that familiarity in a gentle way. It does not always weaken the body by force. It weakens the body's contact with its own capacities. A person may still possess more ability than they feel, but the ability has become less familiar because it is called upon less often. This helps explain why strength can seem to disappear before it has fully disappeared. The nervous system becomes less practiced at organizing effort. The joints become less used to varied angles. The feet become less accustomed to reading surfaces. The trunk becomes less ready to stabilize without support. The breath becomes less comfortable with sustained demand. The body may still be able to respond, but the response feels slower, less certain, and more costly. From the viewpoint of human origins, this is an important layer of the question. Strength was never only tissue. It was also trust built through repetition. A body that grows up and lives in repeated contact with physical necessity becomes familiar with its own usefulness. A body that is spared from many necessities may become unfamiliar with abilities it still carries. This is why modern weakness can feel so strange. It is not always a clean loss of capacity. Sometimes it is a loss of access, a fading of the easy pathway between intention and movement. The world asks less, so the pathway is travelled less, and what is travelled less becomes less smooth. Over time, reduced demand reshapes the body's expectations. It expects support. It expects flatness. It expects short effort. It expects interruption. Then, when life briefly asks for something older, something closer to carrying, climbing, balancing, walking long, rising from the ground, or enduring discomfort, the body feels surprised. That surprise is part of the modern condition. The body is not meeting a new ability. It is meeting an old ability that has not been kept in daily conversation. This completes the quiet change of a life without continuous demand. First, the body becomes less used. Then it becomes less ready. Then it becomes less trusting. Strength remains possible, but it no longer feels like a natural background of being alive. It becomes something that must be rediscovered through contact, repetition, and use, because the world around the body no longer asks for it often enough to keep it near. The older human body stayed strong not because it belonged to a better species, but because it lived inside a world that kept reminding it what it could do. Today, many of those reminders have faded, and the body has begun to believe the silence. Modern life does not remove movement completely. It breaks movement into small pieces and spreads those pieces across a day that is mostly supported. This is why the loss of strength can be difficult to recognize. A person still stands, walks, bends, reaches, carries a bag, climbs a few steps, turns in a room, opens doors and moves between places. On the surface, the body has not stopped, but the pattern is different from the older pattern that shaped human strength. The movements are often brief, predictable, and separated by long periods of stillness. They do not always connect into a living chain. The body is asked to do a little, then stop. A little more, then stop again. It crosses short spaces, not because the world demands a journey, but because built environments have divided space into small controlled distances. The walk from a chair to a door, from a vehicle to a building, from a desk to a kitchen, from a bed to a bathroom, may all count as movement, but they do not carry the same biological message as moving through an environment where distance, surface, load, weather, and need are joined together. In the older human setting, movement usually had more depth. A person did not simply move a few steps and return to support. Movement often continued long enough for the body to organize itself into rhythm. The feet adjusted repeatedly. The legs worked through changing ground. The hips carried force from step to step. The trunk stabilized while the hands were occupied. The breath found a pace that could last. This continuity allowed the body to become warm, coordinated, and awake as a whole. Fragmented movement often does the opposite. It asks for short transitions before the body fully enters motion. Because the effort ends quickly, the body has little reason to keep all systems engaged. It can remain half awake physically, doing enough to complete the task but not enough to preserve broad capacity. Over years, this kind of narrow use becomes a quiet instruction. The body learns that movement is not a deep condition of the day. It is a temporary interruption of stillness. This matters for strength because strength depends on repeated signals that are strong enough, varied enough, and frequent enough to tell the body what to maintain. Small movements can be useful, but when they are too short and too protected, they may not reach the deeper systems that once kept strength present. Bones need load. Muscles need repeated work. Tendons need tension and recovery. Balance needs changing surfaces and small corrections. Coordination needs tasks that involve more than one isolated motion. Modern daily movement often gives these systems only partial information. The body receives many beginnings but few continuations. It receives transitions but not enough sustained physical conversation. From the long view of human origins, this is a major shift. The body was shaped in worlds where movement was tied to material life. Getting somewhere, bringing something back, searching, helping, making, carrying, escaping weather, finding rest, and returning again. Modern movement is often tied to indoor layout, transport systems, devices, furniture, and brief errands. It is still movement, but it has been thinned. It no longer asks the body to remain involved for as long, or to solve as many problems at once. This thinning helps explain why a person can feel both busy and physically underused. The day may be full of motion in a shallow sense, while the body receives too little of the deeper demand that maintains strength. The result is not immediate collapse. It is a gradual narrowing of capacity. The body becomes skilled at short movement within supported spaces, but less prepared for longer movement through demanding ones. It can start, stop, sit, stand, reach, and repeat, yet it may feel uncertain when asked to keep going. This is one reason strength feels harder to keep now. The body is not living without movement. It is living with movement that has been cut into fragments, softened by design, and separated from the continuous demands that once made strength feel ordinary. When movement is broken into fragments, the body also loses the sense of transition that once linked one action to another. In older human conditions, transitions were not interruptions, they were bridges. A person could move from walking to carrying, from carrying to bending, from bending to rising, from rising to walking again, all within the same flow of activity. These transitions kept the body coordinated across different demands without needing to stop and reorganize. The feet continued to feel the ground, the legs continued to carry weight, the trunk continued to stabilize, the hands continued to work, and the breath continued to support effort. Even when the task changed, the body did not fall back into stillness. It shifted within motion. This continuous shifting helped maintain a wide range of capability because the body was constantly connecting different forms of movement. In modern life, transitions are often replaced by stops. A person walks a short distance, then sits, stands briefly, then sits again, lifts something, then returns to support. Each action is separated by a pause that allows the body to disengage. This repeated disengagement changes how the body prepares for the next movement. Instead of carrying readiness forward, it must rebuild readiness each time. Over time, the body becomes accustomed to this pattern. It expects that effort will be brief and that rest will follow quickly. As a result, it reduces the systems that support longer or more varied transitions. This can be felt in simple ways. Moving from sitting to standing may feel stiff. Beginning to walk after a long period of stillness may require a moment of adjustment. Carrying something immediately after rising may feel awkward. These are not large failures, but they reveal a body that is no longer continuously prepared. From the perspective of human origins, This change is significant because much of human strength depended on the ability to connect movements without interruption. The environment did not wait for the body to be fully ready. It required the body to remain ready enough to respond. This readiness was maintained by the fact that movement rarely stopped completely. Even when a person paused, the body often remained engaged in posture, balance, and awareness of surroundings. Modern environments reduce the need for this ongoing engagement. Support systems take over posture. Stable surfaces reduce balance demands. Controlled spaces reduce the need for constant awareness. As a result, the body spends more time in a state of low engagement. When movement returns, it must rise from this low state rather than continue from an already active one. This shift affects not only physical ability but also how movement feels. Actions that should flow may feel segmented. Effort may feel heavier at the beginning and easier only after the body has had time to reorganize. This pattern reinforces itself. Because starting movement feels less natural, a person may avoid unnecessary movement. Because movement is avoided, the body receives even fewer signals to maintain readiness. The cycle becomes one of decreasing engagement. In earlier human life, the cycle worked in the opposite direction. Movement led to more movement, and each action prepared the body for the next. The environment encouraged continuity because tasks were connected. In the modern world, tasks are often separated, and the body follows that separation. It learns to specialize in short actions rather than sustained or varied ones. This does not mean that modern people cannot move well. It means that movement must often be reintroduced deliberately rather than carried forward naturally. The body still has the capacity to connect actions, but it needs repeated opportunities to do so. Without those opportunities, the connections weaken. Strength becomes less about what the body can do in isolation, and more about how easily it can move from one demand to another. When that ease is lost, even simple sequences of movement can feel more difficult than they should. This is another layer of the modern condition. The body is not only moving less in total, it is moving in a way that interrupts its own continuity, and that interruption slowly changes how strength is maintained across the whole day. When movement is fragmented and transitions are lost, another change begins to appear. One that is easy to overlook because it does not feel dramatic. The body starts to rely more on fixed positions than on flowing motion. Sitting becomes the main form of rest, but it also becomes a dominant form of being. Standing may still occur, but often for short periods, with the body arranged in a narrow, supported way. Walking happens, but it is brief, and often directed along predictable paths that do not require much variation. Over time, these repeated positions begin to shape the body's habits. The joints settle into limited ranges. The muscles that support posture in stillness become more active than the muscles that support movement through space. The body becomes better at holding positions than at transitioning between them. This is not an obvious loss, because holding positions can feel stable and controlled. But it reduces the need for the body to remain dynamically organized. In earlier human environments, positions were rarely held for long without change. Sitting might occur on the ground, requiring the body to adjust, shift, and support itself without external structure. Standing might involve subtle movements to maintain balance on uneven surfaces. Resting might still involve awareness of surroundings, posture, and readiness to move again. Even stillness contains small adjustments that kept the body engaged. In modern environments, many positions are supported in a way that reduces the need for these adjustments. A chair holds the body in place. A backrest supports the spine. A flat surface stabilizes the feet. These supports allow the body to relax, but they also reduce the need for continuous low-level activity. The muscles that once worked quietly to maintain balance and posture are used less often. The joints move less frequently through varied angles. The nervous system receives fewer signals from the body about changes in position and movement. This creates a form of physical stillness that is deeper than rest. It is a stillness that removes the small movements that once connected the body to its environment. Over time, this stillness becomes the default. The body expects to be supported, to remain in one position, and to change position only when necessary. When movement is required, it begins from this fixed state rather than from a state of ongoing activity. This shift changes how strength is expressed. Strength becomes something that appears during effort, but fades quickly when the effort ends. It does not remain present in the background of posture and movement. From the perspective of human origins, this is a significant departure. The older body was shaped in conditions where even rest contained elements of activity. The ground required adjustment. The environment required awareness. The body remained part of a continuous exchange with its surroundings. Modern life reduces this exchange by creating spaces where the body can remain still without consequence. This is a benefit in many ways, but it also changes the signals that maintain strength. The body learns that it can remain inactive for long periods without needing to prepare for immediate movement. It adapts by reducing the systems that support dynamic activity. This adaptation is gradual and often unnoticed. A person may not realize how much time is spent in fixed positions or how little variation the body experiences. The day feels full, but the body's range of movement remains narrow. Over years, this narrowing becomes a defining feature of modern physical life. Strength is no longer woven through the day, in small, continuous adjustments. It is reserved for specific moments when the body is asked to do more than hold a position. This reservation makes strength feel less stable. It becomes something that must be accessed rather than something that is always present. The body is still capable, but its capabilities are organized differently. They are tied to moments of action rather than to the ongoing state of being. This completes the pattern of fragmented movement. The body moves in pieces, rests in fixed positions, and loses the quiet continuity that once kept strength integrated into daily life. Recovery can become confusing when the body is tired without being fully used. A person may reach the end of a day feeling heavy, drained, and ready to stop. Yet the body has not moved through the kind of varied physical demand that once made rest part of a clear cycle. The mind has worked, the eyes have focused, the nervous system has answered noise, time pressure, messages, decisions, and small tensions. But the feet may have crossed only short distances, the hips may have stayed folded for hours, the back may have been supported rather than loaded. The hands may have repeated narrow motions instead of gripping, carrying, and shaping different materials. This creates a strange form of fatigue. It is real, but it does not always rebuild strength when rest follows it. Rest after whole body use can help tissues adapt, because the body has received signals that something must be repaired and maintained. Rest after long stillness may feel necessary, but it may return the body mostly to the same stillness it came from. The person sleeps or sits or lies down, and the deeper systems of strength receive little reason to grow more capable. In earlier human conditions, fatigue and physical use were often more closely related. A person who is tired at the end of a day may have walked, carried, bent, lifted, balanced, prepared food, tended shelter, cared for others, or moved through weather and terrain. These activities did not always make people stronger in a simple or romantic way. They could also wear bodies down, cause pain, and expose people to risk. But they tied tiredness to material effort. The body understood why rest was needed because many systems had been used. Muscles had spent energy, bones had received loading, balance had corrected the body through changing surfaces, breath had followed physical pace, recovery followed demand. Modern fatigue can detach recovery from demand. A person may be exhausted by tasks that do not ask the body to organize itself broadly. This detachment helps explain why more rest does not always feel like more strength. The body can receive rest without receiving the physical signal that tells it what to restore. From the long beginning of human life, recovery was not just the absence of effort. It was part of a loop. Use, fatigue, repair, readiness, and use again. The loop did not need to be perfect, and it could be interrupted by illness, hunger, injury, age, and hardship. Still, the body was more often returned to physical necessity after recovery. Today, recovery may return the person to another day of support. Screens, chairs, short walking, and narrow movement. The loop becomes weaker. The body rests but does not always become more ready. It becomes less strained for a while, but not necessarily more capable. This is why the modern body can feel both rested and fragile. Sleep may remove some mental heaviness, yet rising from a chair still feels stiff. A quiet evening may reduce pressure, yet carrying something the next day still feels harder than expected. The problem is not simply lack of rest. It is that rest has lost part of the demand it used to answer. Without varied use before it, recovery has less to build upon. Without repeated physical necessity after it, recovery has less reason to prepare the body broadly. This does not make rest useless. Rest remains essential for every human body. But rest alone cannot keep strength alive if the daily pattern gives the body too little to recover from in a physical sense. The older body did not stay strong because it was denied rest. It stayed strong because rest was joined to use, and use returned often enough to make recovery meaningful. In modern life, that connection can loosen until fatigue becomes mostly a burden of attention while strength waits unused underneath. The body asks for rest, receives it, and still does not regain the older readiness, because the missing piece is not only sleep or pause. It is the kind of lived physical demand that once gave recovery a clear purpose. Recovery also depends on the kind of fatigue that comes before it, and not all fatigue speaks the same language to the body. A long day of attention, decision, and mental pressure can leave a person feeling deeply tired, yet this tiredness often travels through the nervous system more than through the muscles, bones, and joints that once carried daily work. The body may feel heavy, but the heaviness does not always come from repeated lifting, walking, balancing, or sustained physical effort. It comes from a different source, one that does not fully engage the systems that maintain strength. When rest follows this kind of fatigue, it can calm the mind and reduce tension, but it may not provide the same signal for physical rebuilding. The body rests from stress, but it does not always rebuild capacity for movement because the movement itself was not widely used. In earlier human conditions, fatigue was more often mixed. It included mental effort, social effort, and emotional strain, but it was also tied to the body's direct interaction with the environment. A person might think, plan, watch, and respond, but also walk, carry, bend, prepare, and adjust to conditions that required physical participation. This mixture created a fuller kind of tiredness, one that involved many systems at once. When rest followed, it addressed a broader need. Muscles required repair, joints required relief, balance systems required quiet, and the nervous system required a slower pace. Recovery was not perfect, but it was connected to a wide use of the body. Modern life can narrow this connection. A person may feel fully exhausted at the end of a day that has demanded constant attention, yet the body may not have been asked to move through varied physical patterns. The fatigue is real, but it is not distributed across the same systems that once shaped strength. This difference can make recovery feel incomplete. The person rests, sleeps, or pauses, but the body does not return with a stronger sense of readiness. It returns with reduced strain in the mind, while the deeper physical systems remain underused. Over time, this pattern changes expectations. The body becomes accustomed to cycles where effort does not always involve full body movement, and rest does not always prepare the body for such movement. Strength begins to feel disconnected from daily fatigue. A person may feel tired without feeling physically used, and rested without feeling physically ready. From the perspective of human origins, this is a meaningful shift. The older environment did not separate mental and physical effort as clearly as modern life often does. Tasks involved attention and action together. A person watching the ground also moved across it. A person preparing food also handled materials. A person tending a fire also adjusted posture, balance, and position. These combined demands kept the body engaged in a way that modern tasks often do not require. When the environment changes, the body adapts to the new pattern. It becomes efficient at handling mental load while reducing unnecessary physical output. This efficiency can be useful, but it leaves some capacities less practiced. Recovery then follows a narrower form of fatigue, and strength has less reason to remain fully present. This is why simply resting more does not always lead to feeling stronger. The body is not only asking for rest, it is asking for the kind of use that makes rest meaningful. Without that use, recovery becomes partial. It restores calm, but not always capability. The modern person may therefore move between two states, tired from demands that do not fully engage the body, and rested from those demands, without gaining the strength that comes from broader physical use. This cycle can continue quietly, reinforcing itself over time. The body learns to expect fatigue without full use and rest without full rebuilding. Strength remains possible, but it no longer grows naturally from the rhythm of the day. It requires a different kind of pattern, one that modern life does not always provide on its own. The missing link in modern recovery is not rest itself, but the return from rest into meaningful physical use. A body can sleep, sit quietly, reduce stress, and feel less burdened, yet still not regain the older sense of strength if the next day repeats the same narrow pattern. Recovery needs somewhere to go. It prepares the body for what comes after it. In earlier human conditions, what came after rest was often some form of bodily participation. There might be walking, carrying, bending, preparing food, tending shelter, gathering materials, helping others, moving through weather, or simply rising from the ground into a world that did not hold the body up for long. The body recovered into demand, and because demand returned often, recovery had a direction. It was not only a pause from fatigue, it was a bridge back toward use. In modern life, that bridge can become weak. A person rests but then returns to a chair, a screen, a vehicle, a smooth floor, a controlled room, and short fragments of movement. The body is less tired for a while, but it is not asked to become broadly ready. It is asked to become comfortable enough to continue the same pattern. Over time, this changes the meaning of recovery. It becomes restoration for attention more than restoration for physical capability. The eyes can focus again, the mind can return to tasks, the person can continue through responsibilities, but the body's older systems of strength may remain quiet. The feet are not given much ground to read, the hips are not asked to carry distance, the trunk is not asked to stabilize varied effort, the hands are not asked to manage many weights, textures, and directions. The breath is not asked to settle into sustained movement. Without these signals, recovery cannot fully rebuild what has not been called upon. It can remove tiredness without restoring readiness. This is why a person may feel rested in one sense and still weak in another. The surface fatigue may lift, but the deeper capacity remains unused. From the long view of human origins, recovery was not designed for endless comfort. It belonged to a living cycle in which effort returned. This does not mean the past was healthier or easier. Many earlier lives carried hardship, danger, injury, and exhaustion that no one should romanticize. But the physical pattern often gave the body clearer information. Use told the body what mattered. Fatigue told the body what had been spent. Rest allowed repair. The next demand confirmed whether readiness had returned. Modern recovery often lacks that confirmation. The body may rest, but if the world asks only for stillness afterward, the body has no reason to rebuild the older range of strength. It adapts to being rested for stillness, not prepared for broad movement. This creates a quiet loop. Underuse leads to fragile strength. Fragile strength makes movement feel more costly. Costly movement is avoided more often. More avoidance leads to more underuse. Rest then enters the loop, but rest alone cannot break it, because rest is not the same as demand. It can soothe the tired body, but it cannot tell the body which capacities must remain alive. The older human body received that message from the world itself. The modern body often does not. This is the deeper reason recovery now can feel strangely incomplete. The body is not merely asking for more time to stop. It is missing the old rhythm in which stopping and starting belong together. Rest was followed by movement. Movement was followed by fatigue. Fatigue was followed by repair. And repair returned the body to life's physical tasks. When that rhythm breaks, strength loses one of its quiet supports. It no longer grows naturally from the cycle of use and recovery. It waits outside the cycle, possible but not constantly renewed. So the question is not only why you cannot stay strong like humans used to, it is why modern rest so often returns you to the same physical silence that made strength fade in the first place. There is a danger in saying that humans are weaker now, because the sentence sounds too complete. It can make the past seem simple, as if earlier humans were always strong, always capable, and always closer to some perfect natural state. That would not be true. Ancient bodies were not protected from injury, hunger, disease, pain, childbirth risks, heavy labor, cold, heat, violence, or the slow wearing down of joints and tissues. Many people in earlier times would have faced physical limits that modern safety, medicine, shelter, and food systems can now reduce. So the question cannot be answered honestly by turning the past into a golden age of strength. A better question is more careful. In what ways did older environments ask the body to remain strong? And in what ways has the modern environment stopped asking? This changes the story. It moves us away from a simple claim that human beings have declined and toward a clearer view of mismatch. The body today may not be weaker in every possible sense. It may be differently trained by a different world. It may be capable of certain modern tasks that earlier bodies never had to perform. It may survive illnesses and injuries that once would have been more dangerous. It may live longer, safer, and with less exposure to many old threats. But its daily physical instructions are different. It is asked to sit more, to move in shorter fragments, to handle stress through attention rather than whole-body action, to rest without previous physical use, and to live among systems that solve many material problems before the body is involved. From the viewpoint of human origins, this creates an illusion of weakness. The body seems to be failing, but in many ways it is adapting with great precision. It is matching the world it repeats. If the world is flat, supported, climate-controlled, and physically quiet, the body becomes fluent in flatness. Support, controlled temperature, and quiet. The loss is not always a collapse of ability, it is often a narrowing of readiness. Strength that was once broad, practical, and constantly renewed becomes more conditional. It appears when called, but it does not remain as easily in the background. This distinction matters because it keeps the story honest. Earlier, humans were not strong because they were morally better or biologically magical. They were often strong in practical ways because life gave them fewer chances to avoid physical demand. Modern humans are not weak because they are lesser. They are shaped by an environment that has moved many demands outside the body. The same intelligence that built tools, shelters, farms, cities, machines, and digital systems also built a world where broad bodily demand became less constant. This is not a failure of the species. It is one of its central paradoxes. Humans became powerful enough to reduce the need for human strength. Seen this way, weakness becomes partly an illusion created by context. A body sitting in a chair for many hours may seem weak when asked to rise, carry, or endure, but the body is not acting outside its logic. It has been taught that support is normal and that broad demand is rare. A body raised on smooth surfaces may seem unstable on rough ground, but it has simply received fewer lessons from rough ground. A body tired by attention may seem unwilling to move, but its fatigue has travelled through systems that do not fully maintain strength. The modern body is not empty of old capacity. It is often undercooled. It carries possibilities that are less frequently awakened by daily life. This is why the title's question should not become a harsh judgment. You cannot stay strong like humans used to, not because the body has betrayed its origin, but because its origin belonged to a different conversation with the world. The older conversation was louder, more physical, more varied, and less easily postponed. The modern conversation is softer, safer, and more controlled. The body listens to both. And when the second conversation becomes the only one it hears, the first begins to sound like a memory rather than a daily instruction. The illusion of weakness becomes stronger when modern life measures strength in isolated moments. A person notices the body during a lift, a climb, a long walk, a difficult rise from the floor, or a sudden need to carry something heavy. Because these moments feel harder than expected, the body seems to have declined as a whole, but strength has never been only a single measurement. It is also the relationship between capacity and the environment asking for that capacity. A body that is rarely asked to carry may feel weak when carrying returns. A body that rarely walks far may feel weak when distance returns. A body that rarely balances on irregular ground may feel weak when the surface changes. The weakness is real in that moment, but its meaning is not simple. It does not prove that the body has lost all strength in some absolute way. It shows that a certain kind of readiness has not been kept close. In earlier human environments, many tests of strength were built into ordinary life before they became tests. The body had already been walking before the longer distance appeared. It had already been balancing before the rougher ground arrived. It had already been carrying small things before heavier things were required. Its systems were often warmed by use before greater effort came. Modern life can remove this preparation. It keeps the body supported, then suddenly asks for performance. This creates a misleading contrast. The body seems weaker because it is being asked to respond from stillness rather than from movement. From the long beginning of human life, readiness was shaped by continuity, not by surprise. The older body did not have to summon strength out of a quiet day as often. It was more often already inside a physical rhythm. That rhythm made strength feel more available because the path to strength was traveled repeatedly. The modern body may still hold capacity, but the path is less worn. This is why an ordinary task can feel strangely large. The task is not only the task, it is also the distance between the body's recent pattern and the demand suddenly placed upon it. If the recent pattern has been sitting, smooth walking, supported posture, and mental fatigue, then even a moderate physical demand can feel like it belongs to another life. This is not because the body is foolish or broken. It is because the body adapts honestly to what happens most often. The illusion deepens when people compare themselves to a vague image of the past. They imagine earlier humans as permanently strong, always ready, always capable of hardship. But real human history was more varied. Some bodies were worn down early, some were injured, some were underfed, some were protected by community, tools, and knowledge. Some tasks were shared, avoided, or made easier whenever possible. The past was not one body. It was many bodies living under many conditions. What can be said more carefully is that many earlier environments gave more frequent physical instruction than many modern environments do. That instruction kept certain forms of strength closer to everyday life. Today, the instruction is weaker, and so the body's answer is weaker in those same forms. This is a contextual weakness, not a final definition of the human body. Modern humans can still adapt, learn, endure, build skill, and recover capacity when the right signals are repeated. But without those signals, the body does not preserve broad readiness out of memory alone. It cannot live on ancestral instructions if daily life gives different ones. The illusion, then, is not that weakness is imaginary. The illusion is that weakness means the body has simply failed. In truth, the body may be doing exactly what it has always done, becoming the shape of its repeated world. And if that world asks less of the feet, the hands, the hips, the back, the breath, and the balance systems, the body answers by holding less of those older strengths near the surface. The illusion of weakness also hides the fact that strength has changed location. In older human environments, much of the strength that mattered lived directly in the body, because the body was the main bridge between need and the world. The legs carried distance, the hands handled materials, the back supported load, the feet read the ground, the breath followed effort. The body itself held a large share of the work required to continue living. In modern life, some of that strength has moved outward. It lives in roads, machines, pipes, vehicles, buildings, tools, stored food, heating systems, chairs, screens, and networks of people and labor that most individuals never see. A person may feel weaker because the body now carries less of the burden directly. But the human species has not become powerless. Its power has been distributed into the environment it created. This is why the story must be handled carefully. The modern body may lose certain kinds of practical readiness, but the modern human world contains enormous forms of organized strength. A road is stored walking. A pipe is stored carrying. A machine is stored lifting. A house is stored shelter. A heater is stored fire. A delivery system is stored distance and labor. These things do not make the body stronger in itself, but they show where some older demands have gone. They have not vanished completely. They have been transferred from muscle into structure. From the viewpoint of human origins, this transfer is both impressive and costly. It shows the intelligence of a species that learned to protect itself by building support outside its own skin. But it also means that the individual body receives fewer direct reasons to maintain the same broad strength. The world becomes strong around the body, and the body becomes less required to be strong within itself. This can create confusion because humans often measure the body alone and forget the hidden systems surrounding it. A person lifts less, walks less, carries less, and adapts less to rough ground, then feels personally diminished. Yet the broader truth is that the environment has been redesigned to carry those tasks on the person's behalf. The body is not simply declining in an unchanged world. It is adapting inside a world that has absorbed many of its former jobs. This does not make the loss unreal. If the body is asked again to carry, climb, balance, or endure, the reduced readiness may be felt immediately, but the meaning of that loss is different from a simple failure. It is the price of living inside a protected system that has separated survival from continuous physical demand. Earlier humans were not strong because they lacked intelligence or comfort by choice. They were strong in many practical ways because the surrounding world had not yet taken over so much of the work. Modern humans are not weak because they have no capacity. They are weaker in certain older forms because the world no longer trains those forms through daily necessity. The illusion becomes clearest when we remember that the body does not care where history thinks strength should be. It cares where demand is now. If demand is in machines, the machine grows more central. If demand is in screens, attention grows more central. If demand is in sitting still for long periods, the body adapts to stillness. If demand rarely reaches the feet, hands, trunk, and breath, those systems wait. They do not disappear at once, but they become less practiced, less confident, and less woven into ordinary life. This completes the more careful answer before the final turn of the story. The question is not whether humans have simply fallen from a stronger past. The question is how much of human strength has been relocated from the body into the world that humans built. The body still carries the deep inheritance of movement, balance, endurance, coordination, and adaptation. But inheritance is not the same as daily use. If the world no longer asks for those capacities in the old continuous way, they fade toward the background. Strength has not only been lost, it has been externalized. And the modern body lives inside that strange achievement, surrounded by human-made strength while quietly holding less of it in its own tissues. At the end of this long path, the question begins to feel quieter rather than louder. It is no longer only about why strength fades, but about what kind of world the body is living inside, and what that world continues to ask from it. The human body has not forgotten how to be strong. It has followed instructions. It has listened carefully to surfaces that are smooth, to rooms that are stable, to tasks that are short, to systems that carry weight, to rhythms that separate movement from necessity. It has done what it has always done. It has matched the pattern it repeats. When that pattern changes, the body changes with it, not as a failure, but as a form of fidelity to the present. This is why the feeling of loss can be misleading. It feels personal, as if something inside the body has quietly broken or weakened beyond repair. But when placed in the long arc of human history, the change looks more like a shift in conversation. The older conversation between body and world was louder, more physical, more constant, and less forgiving. The modern conversation is softer, safer, and more controlled. The body has not been abandoned by its nature. It has been surrounded by a different set of expectations. Strength once lived close to survival because survival depended on it. Now survival often depends on systems that do not require the same direct physical involvement. The body adapts to this distance. It allows some capacities to rest in the background because they are no longer called forward every day. From this perspective, the question itself begins to open rather than close. You cannot stay strong like humans used to, not because your body is incapable, but because your body is no longer living in the same conditions that once kept strength near. The past did not protect the body from demand, and demand kept strength awake. The present protects the body from many forms of demand, and protection allows strength to sleep. Neither condition is entirely right or wrong. Each carries its own costs and its own forms of relief. The important point is not to choose one over the other, but to understand the difference clearly. The body you have is still the result of a long history of movement, adaptation, and survival. It still responds to use. It still reorganizes itself when patterns change. It still carries more capacity than it often shows in a quiet environment. But it does not hold that capacity at the surface without reason. And 9. It waits for the world to ask. This leaves the story in a different place than it began. It does not end with a conclusion that strength is gone, nor with a simple answer that it can be easily restored. It ends with a recognition of mismatch, of a body shaped in one kind of world and living in another. The body is not confused. It is consistent. It follows the signals it receives. If those signals are soft, it becomes soft. If they are varied, it becomes varied. If they are continuous, it becomes continuous. The final question, then, is not about returning to the past, but about noticing what is being asked now and what is no longer being asked. What parts of the body are being invited into daily life, and what parts are being left waiting? Because strength, in its oldest sense, was never something held tightly for its own sake. It was something that stayed alive because the world would not allow it to fade. And when the world changes, the body does not resist that change. It becomes it, quietly, patiently, and without judgment, until the difference is felt not as a memory, but as the ordinary shape of being alive today. The body out of its original context becomes difficult to understand, because it still looks like the same body. The bones are human bones. The hands are human hands. The feet still carry the old design of balance, pressure, and movement. The spine still rises between gravity and breath. The muscles still respond to demand when demand returns. Nothing about the body announces that the world around it has changed too quickly for its older expectations. This is why the mismatch feels quiet. It is not obvious in a single morning, or a single year, or a single task. It appears in the slow difference between what the body was shaped to expect and what life now repeats. A body formed through long histories of walking, carrying, reaching, bending, balancing, and enduring variation now spends much of its time inside controlled spaces that ask for stillness, attention, and narrow movement. The body is still ancient in its basic rules, but the room is new, the chair is new, the screen is new, the constant support is new, the ability to meet many needs without moving far is new. In this setting, the body adapts faithfully, but that faithfulness can look like decline. It becomes better at what the present asks often, and less ready for what the present asks rarely. This is not a dramatic failure. It is a biological negotiation. Every day, the body is quietly deciding what is worth preserving near the surface. If balance is rarely challenged, balance becomes less awake. If distance is rarely crossed, distance becomes more costly. If load is rarely carried, carrying feels less familiar. If recovery follows stillness more than use, recovery becomes less connected to strength. The older human body lived in a world where these signals arrived without needing to be planned. The ground, weather, food, shelter, tools, and community all helped keep the body in contact with necessity. Today, much of that contact is filtered through systems. The world still requires work, but often not from the whole body. It requires attention, timing, response, patience, and mental endurance. These are real demands, and they can be exhausting, but they do not always speak to the tissues that maintain older forms of strength. This is where the title's question becomes less about weakness and more about displacement. You are not simply weaker than humans used to be. You are living after many of the old demands have been moved away from the body and placed into objects, buildings, networks, and routines. Human intelligence has built a powerful world around the body, but the body itself still waits for direct signals. It cannot receive strength from a road the same way it received it from walking. It cannot receive grip from a tool that removes gripping. It cannot receive balance from a floor that never tilts. It cannot receive endurance from a vehicle that carries the distance. The environment may be stronger, safer, and more efficient, yet the body may become less directly practiced. This is the strange achievement of modern life. The species has extended its strength outward, while the individual body often holds less of that strength within itself. Seen this way, the loss is not only physical, it is also historical. The body has become separated from some of the conditions that once explained it. It still carries the inheritance of earlier lives, but inheritance needs use to remain clear. Without use, it becomes faint, like an old path covered by grass. The path is not gone. It is simply less travelled. And so the body's modern softness is not proof that the old path never existed. It is proof that the body has been walking somewhere else. The final meaning of this mismatch is not that humans should reject comfort, safety, or the world they have built. It is that comfort has consequences, and one of those consequences is silence. The older world kept asking the body to answer. The modern world often answers before the body is needed. Over time, the body hears fewer questions, and a body that hears fewer questions will slowly give fewer answers. The final answer cannot be a return to the past, because the past was not a simple place waiting to be recovered. It was dangerous in many ways, uncertain in many ways, and often harder on the body than memory allows. Earlier humans did not stay strong because life was pure, balanced, or kind. They stayed practically strong where strength was repeatedly required, and they also suffered where the same requirements became too heavy. Modern life has reduced many of those burdens, and that reduction is a real human achievement. The body is safer from many old pressures. It is warmer, more protected, more supported, and more often separated from immediate danger. But safety changes the language spoken to the body. The older language was made of ground, distance, weight, weather, hunger, repair, fatigue, and return. The modern language is made more often of support, speed, storage, smoothness, comfort, and delay. The body understands both languages, but it becomes fluent in the one it hears every day. This is why strength fades so quietly. It is not taken away by one event. It is not lost in one age, one invention, one chair, one machine, or one habit. It is gradually negotiated away by a world that no longer asks for the same physical answers. A road removes some walking. A pipe removes some carrying. A chair removes some posture. A screen removes some travel. A machine removes some lifting. A controlled room removes some weather. A stored supply removes some urgency. None of these things is wrong by itself. Together, they create a new environment, and the body adapts to that environment with the same honesty it once used to adapt to forests, coasts, grasslands, mountains, cold seasons, dry paths, and rough ground. From the long view of human origins, the body is not betraying its past. It is revealing a rule that has always been there. Life preserves what life repeatedly uses. When repeated use fades, readiness fades with it. This truth is calm, but it is not empty. It gives the story value because it removes blame. The modern body is not weak because it lacks worth. It is not lesser because it lives with comfort. It is not separate from human history. It is human history continuing under different conditions. The same species that once crossed difficult land learned to build shelter. The same hands that carried and shaped materials learned to make tools that carry more. The same mind that watched weather learned to build rooms where weather enters less. Every comfort is also a memory of an older difficulty. Every support is also the trace of a burden humans tried to reduce. The question is what happens after the burden is reduced for long enough that the body forgets how close strength once had to remain. At the end, the lesson is not to worship hardship and not to fear comfort. It is to see the relationship clearly. Strength is not a fixed possession locked inside the body. It is a conversation between the body and the world. If the world speaks through varied movement, the body answers with varied readiness. If the world speaks through stillness and support, the body answers with stillness and support. This is neither punishment nor failure. It is adaptation. The quiet message left behind is that human beings are never only what their bodies can do in a single moment. They are also the environments they build, the habits they repeat, the histories they inherit, and the demands they allow to remain close. You cannot stay strong like humans used to because the world no longer holds you in the same old conversation. The body still carries echoes of that conversation, but echoes are not the same as a voice heard every day. And perhaps the deepest question is not how strong humans used to be, but how much of the body's ancient strength can remain awake in a world that has learned so carefully to stop asking for it.